Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into a topic that's been requested by many of you numerous times: ghost marriages. Have the rest of you heard of this before? A union broken in life, but continued in the Yamgan, which is Cantonese for afterlife. This is one of the deeper, older traditions in Chinese culture, one that stretches back thousands of years. At the end of this episode, I'm going to break down the cultural history and meaning behind this concept, so stick around if you're interested. But first, let's begin with our story for tonight. So this story actually went a bit viral in Hong Kong after it was shared many years ago. Some of you in Asia might have already heard a version of it before. It's one of those tales that floats around with a few details changed depending on who's telling it. But make no mistake, this one's pretty creepy. And unlike most ghost stories that happen to one unlucky person, this one involved an entire family. Let's dive right in. The person who shared this story, we'll call her Mina. Mina was around 10 years old at the time when this incident happened to her. She was living with her parents and older brother, Adam. There was a pretty big age gap between the two of them. Adam was the oldest, almost 20 years older than Mina, so growing up, Mina often felt like the baby of the family. At the time, Adam had been dating his longtime girlfriend, Sally, someone he truly loved. They'd been together for over 10 years, and he finally proposed. Mina had known her for as long as she could remember. She called her Sally Zeze, Zeze being the Cantonese term for older sister. To Mina, Sally was already family, not just because she was engaged to her brother, but because she's known her whole life, and also because of how she treated Mina. Sally wasn't rich or fancy, but she was always kind. She had short hair and always wore a kind smile on her face, always showing up with little gifts, like notebooks with cartoon cats or sticker packs from the corner store. They often had their own special girl time, just the two of them, where Sally would bring her out to buy butterfly hair clips and stationery at the local stores nearby. She would braid Mina's hair in cute, stylish twists and tell her that she looked like a little supermodel. Mina loved her. Sally Zeze was the only one who consistently took Mina's side. Even during the classic sibling fights, if Adam ever picked on her, Sally would always be on Mina's side and yell at him to stop picking on his little sister. To Mina, Sally Zeze was more than a future sister-in-law. She was her big sister in every way that mattered. Mina couldn't wait for the day that Adam would finally marry Sally. Adam and Sally already had a wedding date set toward the end of the year. He was working really hard every day at the local factory, saving every cent he could, not just for the wedding, but for the life they were planning to build together. Everyone in the family was excited. It felt like everything was finally falling into place for him. But life is fickle, and sometimes things change in an instant. It was a rainy night in July. Sally was off from work early and had gone out into a nearby food stall to pick something up. It was Adam's favorite stall, and she wanted to buy him a little treat to surprise him when he got out from work. Gale yudan, curry fish balls. She did this every now and then, whenever she had time. She knew how much Adam loved these things, so she liked to bring it home for him to enjoy after work. That night, she was walking back home with a small plastic bag in hand, trying to twist the top closed so that the rain wouldn't soak through. She stepped off the curb into the road when suddenly a delivery truck lost control in the rain. Then, silence. Just the sound of the rain falling. The plastic bag had torn open. The fish balls scattered on the street. And under the downpour, they just sat there on the concrete road, motionless. A crowd began to form, voices murmuring, some people running to the local shops to get more help. Adam got the call at work. He dropped everything and ran. Didn't wait to clock out, didn't even take his umbrella. By the time he reached the hospital, it was too late. Sally didn't survive the impact. The doctors tried everything, but her injuries, they were too severe. The whole family was already there when Adam arrived. Mina stood quietly in the corridor, watching as her big brother collapsed to his knees at Sally's bedside, holding her lifeless body in his arms. And then came a sound that would never leave her memory. A guttural wail, not just grief, but something deeper. Mina had never seen her big brother cry like this before, and it broke her. She was crying uncontrollably herself, but seeing her big brother like this shattered her heart. It was the first time Mina had ever seen death up close. The next morning, Mina woke up to a strange stillness in the house. She wandered into the living room. Adam was sitting on the couch, still in his clothes from yesterday, staring blankly at the floor. In his hands was one of Sally's shirts. He held it gently, like something fragile, as if letting go might make it disappear forever. It was clear he hadn't slept. His eyes were wide open, but somewhere far away. Mina stood quietly in the doorway. She didn't know what to say. Nobody did. A few moments later, their parents sat down beside him, offering quiet words, soft touches, but nothing reached him. Then, Adam finally spoke. His voice was low, almost flat. "I still want to marry her," he said. "Sally, I still want to make her my wife." For a second, no one reacted. Then their parents strained up, not angry, but shaken. "Adam," his father began. "Sally's gone. She's not here anymore." His mother added, "You're still young. You'll heal in time, but this? What you're asking for? It's not something we could support." They couldn't understand. They thought it was just the grief talking. They told him no, it wasn't right, that it wouldn't bring her back. But Adam wasn't looking at them. He was still holding that shirt as if Sally was still here. And in his heart, he had already made the decision, even if no one else accepted it. Adam didn't eat for 3 days. He barely spoke, barely moved. He just sat in silence, holding onto whatever pieces of Sally he had left. A photo, her hair clip, and her shirt. Nothing his parents said could reach him. Not until, finally, they relented. They allowed him to do what he felt like he needed to do. And just to be clear, for those of you who are not familiar, what Adam wanted to do is called Ming Fan. Ming translates to dark, underworld, or spiritual realm. And Fan means marriage or wedding. So together, Ming Fan literally translates to a marriage in the realm of the dead. This is a traditional Chinese practice involving at least one deceased person. Usually it's between two who've already passed, but in rare cases, it can happen between the living and the dead. Adam's case was one of those rare exceptions. His parents eventually spoke with Sally's family, and to their surprise, they agreed. Maybe they saw how much Adam was suffering. They gave their blessing. For a Ming Fan to proceed, both families must agree. Don't do this if you're not 100% sure, because, like marriage and life, it's a binding union. A few nights later, the ceremony was held. A Taoist priest was brought in to perform the ritual. 2 tables were set up in a room, one for each family. Candles flickered in bowls of rice. Incense curled slowly in the air. The atmosphere was heavy. Adam sat in the front of the room, alone in a wooden chair. Next to him, on a separate chair, was Sally's ancestral plaque, carved in wood, polished, and standing upright. The priest began the ceremony, chanting, offerings, ritual steps, a symbolic union between the 2 worlds. At the end of the ritual, Adam took a small wooden doll, in a traditional Chinese wedding outfit, and placed something inside. A few strands of Sally's hair, and a piece of paper bearing her name, birth date, and the time of birth. The doll was meant to represent Sally, a physical vessel for her spirit to inhabit. A bride crafted for a wedding no longer of this world. And just like that, they were married. After the ceremony, the wooden doll didn't get stored away or placed on some forgotten shelf. She lived with them permanently. At every dinner, the doll was placed at the table, usually next to Adam. And each night, before they began eating, Mina's mother would look at her and say firmly, "Remember to greet your sister-in-law before eating." Mina would politely glance at the doll and say, "Daiso, sikfan la," meaning, "Sister-in-law, please eat." It was the same honorific she would have used if Sally were still alive, the proper way to address a big sister by marriage. And so, Mina obeyed, every single meal. No one ever treated the doll like a toy or decoration. She was part of the family. Growing up, it felt strange at first, but over time, it became routine, except for the things Mina couldn't explain. Mina shared a bedroom with Adam. She had the top bunk, and he slept on the bottom bunk. One night, she remembers feeling too warm and kicking off her blanket. It slipped off the bed and landed on the floor. She was too tired to climb down to get it, so she just drifted off without it. But when she woke up the next morning, the blanket was back, neatly placed over her, tucked in. Adam didn't do it. She was sure of that. First of all, he never did these kind of things. And second, once Adam fell asleep, nothing woke him. He was a famously deep sleeper. She asked her parents the next morning if they had come into the room during the night. They looked puzzled. No, her mother said. We slept through the night. There was another time when Mina was around 12. Something else happened to her on the way home from school. She'd taken a shortcut through a narrow alleyway, something she did often, when a group of stray dogs appeared. Locals call these donggaos, street dogs, usually harmless but sometimes territorial. This time, they were different. The dogs began barking aggressively, baring their teeth. Mina backed into a corner, her school bag pressed against her chest. The lead dog crept closer, growling low. It was the kind of sound animals make right before they attack. Mina froze, and then, just as it lunged forward, the dog yelped. Loud and sharp, like it had been struck or frightened. It scrambled backwards. The others hesitated, then scattered in all directions, tails tucked. For a brief second, Mina felt something, someone beside her. She turned to look. No one was there. Over the years, little things like this kept happening. Tiny, almost forgettable things. Random butterfly clips appearing in her school bag. Stickers she hadn't bought. All the kinds of things she and Sally Tete used to shop for at the corner store. She never saw who placed them in there, but somehow, she had a feeling. When Mina was 14, she started getting really bad headaches. At first, they came and went. Then, they got worse. After a hospital checkup, the doctors found a small tumor in her brain. She needed surgery right away. Her parents were devastated. The doctors warned them this procedure was very high risk. There were no guarantees. The night before the operation, Mina laid in the hospital bed, too scared to sleep. At some point, she must have drifted off, caught between sleep and wakefulness. When she sensed someone sitting beside her, she felt a hand stroking her hair gently, reassuringly. Mina opened her eyes halfway. There was a shadowy figure in the chair next to her bed. The silhouette of a woman. She couldn't see her face clearly, but she didn't feel afraid. It felt familiar, warm. She thought, maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was just her mind playing tricks on her. The next morning, as they wheeled her into the operating room, Mina was cold and scared. She was shivering. The anesthesia mask covered her face. The lights above were too bright. Her heart was pounding. Just before she lost consciousness, she saw someone. It was a woman, stepping next to the operating table. She stepped forward quickly, held Mina's hand, and whispered in her ear, "Don't be scared, Mina. You'll be okay. I'm right here with you." When Mina woke up again, she was already in the recovery room. Her parents were there. Her mom cried, tears of relief. "The surgery was a success," she said. "Everything went perfectly. You're going to be fine. You did great." Later, the doctor came by to check on her. Mina asked, "Excuse me, doctor, was there a woman in the operating room before the surgery started, with short hair? I didn't see her clearly, but I wanted to thank her. She gave me strength when I felt most alone." The doctor paused, confused. "No," he said. "That wouldn't have been possible. No one is allowed in the OR before surgery. We don't want to risk contamination. Everyone inside are in scrubs and surgical caps, so hair wouldn't be exposed." He suggested maybe it was the anesthesia. A side effect is hallucination. But Mina knew better. It wasn't a dream. It had to be her. Sally Tete. The sister who had always protected her, in life and now in death. Mina had never seen her directly, not fully, but she always felt her, in the shadows, in the quiet moments, in times of fear. And she's certain Sally never left. She's still watching, still guarding. So, what do you guys think happened to Mina? Do you think that after the Mingfan ceremony, the spirit of Sally really inhabits the wooden doll and is now watching over Mina and her family? Or do you think she imagined everything? Let us know in the comments below. So now, I want to take some time to dive deeper into the cultural aspects of this phenomenon known as Mingfan or ghost marriage. The history of this practice dates back to over 2,000 years. The core idea was to ensure that the dead are not alone in the afterlife, especially those who died unmarried. In Chinese culture, it's believed that someone who dies single may become restless or lonely in the afterlife. It's considered a kind of unfinished fate, so a proper marriage, even in death, allows the spirit to settle peacefully. There are two different types of Mingfan. The first is deceased to deceased marriage. This is also the most traditional form, where two dead individuals are symbolically married. It's often initiated by both the families of the bride and the groom, especially if both died young or tragically. The second is living to deceased marriage, which is what happened in this story. This is more rare, but still practiced quietly in some regions. This happens when a living person, out of love or obligation, insists on fulfilling an engagement or bonding with someone who has already passed. Once performed, the living spouse is often considered married for life. So you're probably thinking, so does this mean that the living spouse can never remarry again? The answer can be yes and no, depending on how the tradition of the families are. In traditional families, the living spouse may not remarry, because doing so is seen as a betrayal of the deceased. Even dating again might be taboo. However, in more modern and flexible families, the living person can remarry, but only after performing a ritual to release the bond. This is pretty much like a symbolic divorce or separation ceremony. This is done to let the deceased move on peacefully and to prevent any spiritual jealousy or unrest. The actual Mingfan ritual is often led by experienced Taoist priests. It includes preparing ancestral tablets or spirit tablets for the deceased, using symbolic items such as paper bride or groom, or in modern cases, a wooden doll. A red string is often tied between the two to symbolize the bond. Hair, birth date, information, or personal belongings may be placed inside the doll or offered on an altar. After the ceremony, offerings and prayers are made regularly. So even though Mingfan sounds a little bit creepy to some of you, it's not just fully about ghosts or superstition. It's deeply tied to ancestral duty, love, loyalty, and closure. So I know I talked about two different types of Mingfan, and in Mina's story, we heard about the second type. Would you also like to hear one story about the first type, the deceased to deceased marriage? This story is shared by a woman from Hong Kong. Let's call her Mandy. Mandy is in her 30s now, but the events that happened to her began nearly 3 decades ago, back when she was just a little girl. At the time, Mandy lived with her parents. One weekend, the family paid a visit to their grandmother's home, a small house tucked away in one of the older villages in Hong Kong. There wasn't much to do out there. No TV, no toys, just the stillness of old furniture and the scent of incense clinging to the walls. Out of boredom, Mandy began to poke around the house, opening drawers, peeking behind curtains, and just exploring every dusty corner. Eventually, she wandered over to the family altar. Even at that age, she knew what it was. Her parents had taught her to bow respectfully, to never touch. But curiosity got the better of her. Standing on top of a wooden stool, she leaned in to examine the row of ancestral tablets, Sanju Pai in Cantonese. For those unfamiliar, a Sanju Pai is a wooden or stone plaque kept in homes or temples. It represents a deceased ancestor, a kind of spiritual residence for their soul. Families make offerings to it, incense, food, prayers, like a little personal memorial for the dead, maintained across generations. As Mandy scanned the rows of names carved in gold, something caught her eye. In the corner of the altar, slightly tucked behind one of the tablets, was a plain white paper fan. There were no designs on it, no decorations, just a cheap white paper fan already starting to turn yellow with age. It didn't look like it was meant for display. At the handle, a thin red string was tied, and the other end of the string was knotted tightly around one of the wooden plaques. Mandy squinted at the name etched on the plaque. She wasn't great at reading Chinese yet, but she couldn't make out any of the characters. She called over her grandmother. "Papa, what's this?" she asked. "And why is there a paper fan tied to it?" Her grandmother stopped in her tracks. For a moment, she just stared at Mandy. Then quietly, she said, "Come down from there, Mandy. You're going to fall and hurt yourself." She walked over, lifted Mandy gently off the stool, and set her back on the floor. Then, without a word, Grandma sat down on the stool, the same one that Mandy had been standing on, and looked quietly at the altar. She let out a soft breath. "That Sanju Pai," she said, "belongs to someone Mandy's never met before. And that fan is someone she lost a long time ago." There was a distant sadness in her voice. Not sharp or fresh, but the kind that stays buried for decades. She began to tell Mandy a story she's never heard before. When Grandma was very young, she gave birth to a baby boy. But just a few days after he came into this world, he passed away due to health complications. Too fragile, too early. At that time, he hadn't been given a name yet. In Chinese tradition, it's said that when a baby dies before they're named, their spirit becomes lost. With no name, no identity, and no place to return to, the soul is left to wander in the Yamgan, the underworld. A restless soul, a spirit without an anchor. But there is a way to give that soul a home. The temple elders told Grandma she could use a physical object to represent him, a symbolic vessel for his spirit to dwell in. She chose a white paper fan. For over 20 years, it stayed there, until one night, something strange happened. Grandma had a dream, but not just any dream, one of those vivid, too real dreams that cling to you even after you wake. She dreamt of a beach, a beautiful, quiet beach at night. The air was heavy with mist, but peaceful. The tide lapped gently on the shore, and in the distance, there was a small house with a warm light glowing from its windows. She began walking toward it. As she approached, the front door opened, and out stepped a young couple, a man and a woman, both smiling, both unfamiliar. But when Grandma looked at the young man's eyes, a strange warmth flooded her, a kind of recognition that bypassed memory. And then he spoke. "Ma," he said, smiling wide. The boy, who never left past infancy, now stood before her, a grown man in his 20s. Without realizing it, tears began slipping down Grandma's face. She reached out and took his hands. And then he said, "Ma, guess what? I'm not alone anymore. I found a wife here. Her family wants to meet you." He looked at her gently. "Please, remember this address," he said, repeating it a few times so she wouldn't forget. "Please go say hello." Grandma looked down and noticed something in his hand, a white paper fan, the same one she had placed on the altar decades ago. The young woman standing next to him didn't speak, but she smiled politely and nodded as the man spoke. Then he leaned in and hugged Grandma tightly. "Thank you for everything, Ma," he whispered. "Before you visit, please don't forget to bring the fan with you." And just like that, the dream ended. Grandma woke up in her bed, heart pounding, her face still damp with tears. The moment Grandma woke up, she grabbed a pen and paper and scribbled the address down, afraid that even a few seconds more, it might slip away. It sounded familiar, a village name not far from her own, maybe 20 or 30 minutes away. Still unsure if it was real, she decided to find out. The next morning, she took the folded paper with her and set off. Eventually, she found it. A modest 3-story village house, nearly identical to her own, laundry hanging outside, the kind of place you would walk by without a second glance. She knocked on the door. A woman answered, about the same age as Grandma had been at the time. Grandma hesitated, then began telling her everything. The dream, the beach, the house, the young man, her son, his bride. Grandma expected disbelief, but the woman didn't flinch. She just listened quietly, and then said something Grandma didn't expect. "Yes, I was expecting you." She stepped aside and opened the door wider. "I had a similar dream a few nights ago," the woman said. "I've been waiting for you to come." Inside the house, the woman told her story. She too had lost a child nearly 20 years ago, a baby girl who passed away not long after birth. And then softly, the woman asked, "Did you bring the white fan?" Grandma froze. She hadn't mentioned anything about the white fan yet, not once. But somehow, the stranger knew. It didn't make any sense, but neither woman doubted it. Their dreams had matched, the same beach, the same little house, the same message. Their children were no longer alone. In the world of the dead, Yamgan, they had found each other, and now they were married. The two mothers decided to honor what had already been done in the afterlife. Together, they visited a local Taoist shaman, someone known in the villages for handling spiritual matters. With his guidance, they held a quiet ritual. Offerings were made. The white fan was placed next to a newly carved ancestral tablet to represent both the son and the daughter. And then a red string was tied, officially and permanently, from the fan to the plaque. From that day forward, both families began treating the two spirits as one married couple. Every year they met up to burn incense, left food offerings, and had dinner together. And with these two stories, I hope you learned a little bit more about what Mingfan is, a tragic love that crossed boundaries of life and death. Whether you believe in the practice of Mingfen or not, what's clear is that Sally never truly left. Not in spirit, not in love, and certainly not in the memories of those she held dear. For Mina, growing up with Sally's presence quietly watching over her, protecting her, comforting her, was proof that some bonds go far beyond what we can see or explain. Maybe, in the world of the living, this marriage was cut short, but in the realm beyond, it continues quietly, lovingly, and forever. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Tonight, we're going to be talking about something that everyone in Hong Kong knows about. You may have heard of something called Hong Zak, which refers to a stigmatized property, a unit where someone has died. Whether it's murder, someone ending their own life, or even if it's just an accidental or unattended death, once it happens inside, the place is forever marked. In Cantonese, Hong means ominous, and Zak means residence. Together, it basically means ominous residence. Because of strong cultural taboos surrounding death and spirits, these properties are always heavily discounted on the market, sometimes by 30% or more, but that's not always a good thing. It's very similar to Japan's accident properties. The key difference? In Japan, real estate agents are required by law to disclose if a recent unnatural death happened, usually within the last 3 years. But in Hong Kong, there's no law saying that they have to list the property as such, unless you ask. If asked, then they must answer honestly, even if the death happened decades ago. So unless you know what to look for, or if you ask the right questions, you might end up living in a place with a very dark history. But for the most part, most agents are very upfront about this. Even if they don't say anything, it's usually pretty obvious from the price alone. There are a ton of stories revolving around these type of units. Our story tonight will be one of those. After the story, I'll dive a little deeper into the cultural beliefs, so if you're interested, stick around till the end. A few years ago, a real estate agent in Hong Kong was approached by a family of 4, a husband and wife, Howard and Mandy, with their 2 children, who were 13 and 15 years old. They were looking to rent a modest apartment, something affordable. The agent had just the place, a unit in the exact area they were looking, listed at slightly below market price. On paper, it ticked all the boxes: good location, functional layout, quiet building, and most importantly, it wasn't a Hong Zak. No one died inside, but the unit right next door was a Hong Zak. A woman who had once lived there had jumped to her death from her balcony. The flat had remained empty since, and because the 2 units were so close, sharing only a thin wall, this unit that the agent wanted to show had also become hard to rent, so the owner was willing to go slightly below market price. The 2 units had an L-shaped layout, meaning that from the living room, you could see directly into the living room of the Hong Zak. And although no one has died in this current unit, that view was enough to turn most renters away. The agent, to his credit, was completely transparent about the whole thing. He told the family up front that next door was a Hong Zak. A woman had taken her own life there, and though this unit was clean, some people do mind, which is why the price was below market. Howard and Mindy didn't mind though. They weren't religious. They also didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything supernatural. To them, it was just a sad story, someone else's tragedy, nothing more. And at the price the owner was asking, it felt like a great deal. They came in for a showing, liked what they saw, and signed the paperwork within days. The couple, 2 children, and their live-in helper, May, from Indonesia. For those of you unfamiliar, in Hong Kong, it's very common for families with children to hire live-in domestic helpers. Usually they're from the Philippines or Indonesia. They help with childcare, cooking, cleaning, and are often the quiet backbone of the home. Now keep in mind, the family knew about the unit next door, but they didn't tell May. Not because they wanted to hide anything, exactly. They just didn't feel it was necessary. They weren't superstitious, and they assumed May wouldn't be either. Instead, they gave her one simple instruction: keep the living room blinds closed, unless you're cleaning the window. No need to have them open otherwise. Though not superstitious, it wouldn't hurt to be safe. May didn't ask why. She just did as she was told, and always kept the blinds shut in the living room, unless she had to go out to the balcony to hang clothes to dry. Howard and Mandy worked during the day, and both of the kids were in school, so most of the time it was just May at home by herself during the day. She would normally keep herself busy with her routine of household chores, washing the laundry in the morning, and then hanging them on the balcony to dry. She would also prepare ingredients to make dinner before she headed out to pick the children up from school. It was a pretty standard routine, and nothing really out of the ordinary happened for the first month or so since the family and May moved in. That is, until the sounds began. It started subtly, about a month after they moved in. Howard and Mandy's bedroom was the one closest to the unit next door, the Hongzak. Their bed's headboard was pressed up against the shared wall, and that's where the sounds came from. It always happened between 2 and 3 a.m., just a few fleeting moments each night, but enough to wake Mandy. At first, it sounded like muffled arguing, just beyond comprehension. Then, sometimes there were other noises, the scrape of furniture like a chair being dragged across the floor. Sometimes it would be a slam of a drawer, or something heavy shifting suddenly. It was sporadic and unpredictable. It didn't happen every night, but every few nights it would happen again. It was always brief, never lasting more than a few seconds. One night, Mandy pressed her ear to the wall, trying to make sure that the source of the noise was actually coming from the unit next door. But the moment she did, the sound stopped. Mandy was confused. The unit next door has been empty for years now. She was sure of that. So how is it possible that these sounds were coming from that unit? The strange thing was, she was the only one who ever heard them. Howard slept through everything. Not once had he stirred. Maybe she was just a light sleeper. That's what she told herself. It was weird, yes, but not terrifying. Not yet. So Mandy tried to push it aside, chalk it up to stress or bad dreams. But then, something else started happening. Each morning, Mandy would wake up around 6 in the morning, just before the kids to get ready for work, and to eat a quick breakfast with her family before May brought the children to school. And every morning, when she stepped into the living room, the blinds were wide open. At first, she assumed May had opened them, so she would just close them back up. May was always up early, cooking breakfast and getting the kids ready for school. So one morning, casually, Mandy reminded her, "Hey May, can you please remember to keep the blinds closed after you open them?" May paused. She looked genuinely puzzled. "Ma'am, I didn't open them," she said softly. "I close them every night before I go to bed. I thought maybe you opened them." Mandy said nothing, just smiled, nodded, and went on with her morning, thinking this was strange. May has been with them for years and was always an honest person. Again, Mandy brushed this off as well, as she had to rush to get to work. But this was the 4th time now that the blinds were open, and it wouldn't be the last. One night, Mandy couldn't sleep. It was late, maybe sometime past 2 a.m., and the flat was silent. Howard lay beside her, sound asleep. The kids were tucked in and snoozing away, but Mandy couldn't fall asleep, so she got up quietly and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. She stood by the sink, sipping slowly, staring into the dark living room. That's when she noticed some movement in the corner of her eye. Her eyes flicked to the living room. The blinds, which were shut, were moving. Not much, just a little bit. It slowly shifted open in small, jerky motions, opening a few centimeters at a time, then stopping. A pause. Then another twitch. Then again. Mandy squinted. Is there a draft? The window can't be open, right? She set her glass down and stepped forward slowly. Blinds twitched again, just a little wider this time. And then, that's when she saw it. A hand. Thin and pale. It looked like a woman's hand with long nails, gripping the bottom corners of the blinds. It moved again, slowly, tugging the curtains open inch by inch, as if someone on the other side was trying to peek through. Mandy's breath caught in her throat. She backed away slowly, then bolted back to her room. She dove back into bed and yanked the sheets over her head like a child. She didn't dare wake Howard. He wouldn't believe her. He never believed in this kind of stuff. The next morning, Mandy was off work, as she needed to use some leftover PTO days before they expired. Howard left early for work. The kids were already at school, and May had just returned from dropping them off. Mandy waited until they were alone. Then quietly she asked, "Hey, May, after we moved in, have you noticed anything strange happening here? You're home more than the rest of us. Has everything been okay?" May was at the sink, casually rinsing the breakfast dishes as Mandy leaned against the counter behind her. The sound of running water filled the kitchen, steady, almost soothing. She didn't seem startled by the question, just paused for a moment thinking. Nothing really out of the ordinary, ma'am, she said with a light shrug. The only strange thing is, when I go out to the balcony to hang the laundry, the woman next door is always there, just watching me. May chuckled softly like she was trying to make light of it. I always say hello, I wave, I smile, but she never waves back. She just stands there, staring, with this really mean look on her face. I don't think she's very nice. The water shut off with a final splash. Mandy didn't respond right away. She felt her stomach twist. Her mouth went dry. Because as far as she knew, no one lived next door. Mandy's heart sank. She said nothing to May. Didn't tell her the truth, that the unit next door was supposed to be empty. She didn't want to scare her. But inside, Mandy's unease was building fast. That afternoon, she messaged a few close friends, the kind who did believe in ghosts, in spirits, in the unseen. She didn't go into too much detail, just asked if they knew anyone who could help with something strange. By evening, she had a name, a Taoist priest, one who helped her friend in a similar situation. He agreed to come by the next day. Mandy would be off work again, another PTO day. Howard would be in the office, and the kids would be at school. It would be the perfect time to cleanse the flat, if that's what it came to. That night, Mandy had trouble sleeping again. The noises were back. Muffled voices, low, strained, like someone arguing. Furniture shifting. Something scraping across the floor. She sat up, heart beating fast, and slowly got out of bed. In the darkness, she pressed her ear on the wall behind the headboard. Silence. She pulled her head back, unnerved now. And then, a sudden burst of violent knocking slammed through the wall. Mandy gasped and stumbled backwards, heart racing. The room fell silent again. She stood there frozen, staring at the wall. Nothing. Trying to calm herself, Mandy stepped out to the kitchen to get a glass of water. That's when she noticed it. The balcony door was wide open. A cold breeze moved through the living room. And standing just outside, lit faintly by the glow of the city, was May. She was barefoot, still wearing her pajamas, just standing there, staring toward the flat next door. Mandy blinked. May? She called softly. What are you doing out there so late? No response. May didn't move, didn't turn around. It was like she was in a trance. Then, without a word, May placed her hands on the balcony railing and began to lift one leg up, slowly, deliberately, as if she was about to climb over. Mandy's body moved before her brain could catch up. She rushed forward and grabbed May, pulling her back with all her strength. They both collapsed onto the floor inside the flat, hard. May blinked rapidly, dazed. Ma'am? What happened? She whispered. Why am I out here? She had no idea what she just done. No memory of opening the door or standing on the balcony, let alone trying to climb the railing. Mandy helped her up, saying that she must have been sleepwalking. She led her quietly back to her room, pulled the blankets up around her, and came back out to lock the balcony door. Then, she returned to her own room, closing the door behind her. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, after Howard left to go to work, and May was out walking the kids to school, the Taoist priest arrived, just as promised. Mandy welcomed him inside and offered tea, though he politely declined. She sat with him and explained everything. The noises on the wall, the blinds opening on their own, May's strange encounter, and the hand that she saw when the blinds were opening on their own. The priest listened quietly, nodding occasionally. His expression was calm but unreadable as he was looking around the apartment. When she finished, he didn't ask to see the rest of the flat. The issue, he said simply, is not in here. It's next door. The woman who died, her spirit, hadn't crossed over. And though she hadn't died in Mandy's apartment, their flats were physically connected, sharing a wall, a balcony sightline, and possibly even a spiritual gateway. In Taoist belief, he explained, the yin energy, yamhei, as well as the spirit, can bleed across walls, especially since the two units are so close. This is why surrounding units, even above or below a hongzak, are usually affected as well. Since he didn't have access to the hongzak next door, he couldn't seal the spirit where she belonged, but he could build a barrier, a spiritual shield, to prevent her from entering this unit again. She's already reached in with her hand. That means if she wanted to, she could come in completely if she hasn't already. The ritual he would perform was called Zansat, the suppression of evil forces. Not a banishment, not destruction, but a containment, a spiritual redirection meant to keep the influence out. He began to work quietly. He lit incense in each corner of the flat, chanting softly under his breath. He pasted yellow talismans, painted with red cinnabar ink, on the shared bedroom wall, the balcony door, and the living room window. Each one had a symbol designed to ward off wandering spirits and to seal energetic entry points. At the balcony, he burned a folded paper offering, a symbolic gift for the dead, and scattered blessed water along the threshold. Inside, he used a small bronze bell to break up lingering energy, the clear ring echoing through the room. Finally, he stood still in the center of the flat, chanting one final verse, a passage meant to guide lost souls away and return balance to the home. When it was over, he advised Mandy, "You should continue to keep the blinds closed whenever possible. Don't speak to her even if she appears again, and just call me if anything else happens." Mandy thanked him and gave him a red envelope as a donation. He gave a respectful bow and then quietly made his way out. Mandy stood at the door for a moment, watching him disappear down the hallway. She knew Howard wouldn't be thrilled when he came home and saw talismans stuck to the walls, especially the one behind their bed, but he'll get over it. After everything she's seen, better safe than sorry. After the ritual, things quieted down. The banging on the walls stopped, the blinds stayed shut, and May never sleepwalked again. There were still moments, small ones. Sometimes, late at night, Mandy would lie awake and still hear faint voices through the wall. But it was never loud, never aggressive, just murmurs, like a memory that hadn't quite faded. The talismans stayed where the priest had placed them. Mandy told Howard that they were for good luck. He rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. She told May the same. "Clean around them, but don't take them down," she said gently. "They keep the home safe." May nodded, accepting it without question. A few weeks passed by. Things felt normal again, but curiosity lingered. One morning, when May was folding laundry, Mandy finally asked, "Hey May, do you still ever see that woman next door?" May paused, hands still for a moment. "Sometimes," she said softly. "Not often. Maybe once a month?" She didn't sound scared, just matter of fact. "Before, she used to stand on the balcony and stare at me every time I went out to hang laundry, angry, like she hated me. But now, I only see her inside her own living room, just walking around her own flat. She doesn't look at me anymore, but for the most part, it was rare to see her at all." So, what exactly happened here? Were May and Mandy just seeing and hearing things? Why were they the only ones who experienced anything, while the rest of the family didn't? Was it all in their heads? Or was something paranormal really happening here? Here's what I think happened. In traditional Chinese belief, some people are said to be more sensitive to yin energy. We call this yang pei chong in Cantonese, which means they carry heavy yin energy in their body. These people are more prone to sensing things others can't, hearing voices, feeling unseen presence, or even seeing full apparitions. Not everyone is equally affected by spirits. In fact, if someone isn't naturally receptive, it can be hard for them to even believe spirits exist, because to them, they don't. Now, children are usually more receptive, but they tend to grow out of it by the time they're around 7 or 8 years old. In this story, Mandy's kids were 13 and 15, well past that age, so it makes sense why they couldn't experience anything. Only May actually saw the ghost. Mandy only heard things, and once saw the hand of the spirit. Spirits are often drawn to people who are alone often, like May during the day, stressed or emotionally open, like Mandy. And in Taoist belief, women in general are considered more yin than men, especially during periods of stress or emotional exhaustion. So you had two women, both open, vulnerable in different ways, and both quietly marked by the spiritual proximity of the Hongzha next door. Now, we've talked about some of these concepts in earlier episodes, so I won't go too deep into them again, but I do want to circle back to the idea of Hongzha and why it carries such heavy stigma in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has one of the most superstitious cultures in the world. A hongzak, a home where someone has died, especially from someone ending their own life or violence, is considered spiritually polluted. Most people in Hong Kong won't just refuse to live in one. They won't even live in one next door or above or directly across the hall. It's believed that the space is infused with death energy, or worse, the spirit of the deceased, still lingering if they weren't properly crossed over. That energy doesn't just disappear on its own. It has to be cleansed, or it will still cling to the walls, the windows, even the air. Sometimes these units sit empty for years, and yes, there are some infamous hongzak cases in Hong Kong. If you're interested, I'd be more than happy to cover a few of these in future episodes. Some of you might already be familiar with them, so I'll look into sharing some of those with you soon in future episodes. But that's for another night. Thanks so much for joining me this week and listening up to this point. Looking forward to speaking with you again next week. Hey, welcome back everyone. Tonight's story takes us to a public housing apartment in Hong Kong. Have any of you grew up in, or at least visited, one of these before? These housing estates are like mini cities, where hundreds, or sometimes even thousands of people might live within a few square blocks. Many of these public housing estates also carry a lot of strange stories. With so many lives packed in such tight quarters, it's no surprise that these buildings have their fair share of strange stories. Tragedies and accidents happen over the years, and sometimes what's left behind doesn't move on so easily. Tonight's story comes from a man, let's call him Mark, who grew up in one of these public housing estates. Mark describes growing up in this building back in the 90s as one of the best times of his life. Everyone on his floor pretty much knew each other, and all the kids would head out and play together almost every day after school. It wasn't just his family's flat that felt like home, it was the whole building. The stairwells, the corridors, the rooftop, even the little corners by the garbage chutes. To the kids, the building wasn't just where they lived, it was their own massive playground. Once school was out for the day, Mark's routine rarely changed. He would drop off his backpack at home, grab a quick snack, and then head right back out to meet his friends, most of whom were just getting back from school as well. They would play hide and seek around the building, race each other up and down the hallways, or ride bikes outside until the sun went down. Their choices felt limitless. With most of their parents busy working, the kids had a run of the place. It was like they had their own little world, and they loved it. The housing estate that Mark lived in was one of the older ones, designed in that classic well shape. All the units wrapped around in a square layout, forming a hollow core in the middle. From the ground floor, if you look up, you could see rows and rows of balconies stacked on top of each other, rising all the way to the sky. In the center was a wide open terrace on the ground floor, a kind of shared courtyard where kids would gather, old men would play chess, and laundry would flap from the railings above like flags. There was an old woman who lived on the 14th floor. Mark guessed she was probably in her 80s. She was always there, sitting just outside her unit on a little wooden stool, watching the kids run around and play with this soft, kind smile on her face. She always had the same red plastic bag with her, and inside that bag, candy. Every time she saw kids passing by, she would call out in a cheerful voice, "Hey kids, come over, I've got some candy, come and take some." And of course, they always went. Mark and his friends were still young, probably too young to know any better. Back then, stranger danger wasn't really something they really thought about. They never questioned it, never wondered why she was always out there, never even asked for her name. She was just there. Does she even count as a stranger? She was pretty much part of the building, like the stairwell or the mailboxes. It was always just her. Mark and his friends have never seen any other family member there. On this particular night though, when this incident occurred, it was getting close to 9 p.m. The sky was already pitch black, and Mark was squeezing in one last game of tag with his friends before everyone had to head home. He was it, so he had to be the one chasing the others, darting between the floors, trying to catch someone else. He remembers that night vividly, the way his footsteps echoed through the stairwells. At that moment, he was on the 13th floor, and that's when something caught his eye. He happened to glance up, and there she was. The granny standing on the 14th floor balcony, waving at him, smiling. That same kind, familiar grin. In one hand, she held her usual red plastic bag, bulging with candy. With the other, she waved at him, beckoning him to come up. And of course, Mark didn't hesitate. He never turns down free candy from Granny. From the 13th floor, just as Mark was about to head up, something else caught his attention. Behind the Granny, inside her flat, he could see two figures standing in the darkness. Her unit had no lights on. It was completely dark. But the glow of the light from the hallway outside spilled in just enough for him to make out two shapes, just standing there, still. Mark didn't really think too much about it at the time. He was more focused on the candy. So, up he went. Just one short flight to the 14th floor, less than a minute of walking. But by the time he got there, she was gone. Her front door was shut. And sitting just outside her door, placed neatly in front of the entrance, was a large white candle. It was lit and flickering gently in a round metal basin. Hanging from the door handle was the same red plastic bag, the one he saw Granny holding just a minute ago. It was full of candy, just like always. That's weird, Mark thought. She was just out here waving at me, and now she's gone? Did she go to bed that fast? It was only 9 o'clock. Who sleeps that early? Still, he reached into the bag and grabbed a few pieces of candy. He figured she must have left it out for him. But just as he was turning to leave, he noticed something else. The front door wasn't fully closed. It looked shut, but if you looked closely, it wasn't locked. There was a crack. Just enough to peek through. Mark hesitated, then leaned forward. Maybe she's still awake. Maybe he could say a quick thank you for the candy if he could see her. So he peeked inside. Mark squinted through the crack in the door, but he couldn't see anything. Even with the hallway light creeping in, the inside of the unit was just abnormally dark, like the darkness was swallowing the whole light. He leaned in a little closer, trying to make something out, and that's when his eyes shifted upward, toward the top of the door. There, near the ceiling, was a pair of eyes, staring right back down at him. These eyes weren't like anything Mark's ever seen before. It seemed to stare through him, and it gave him a very heavy feeling as it looked at him. It made him feel small and helpless. Mark stumbled backwards. Now, he realized why he couldn't see anything inside the unit. This figure standing right behind the door was huge. It was so tall, its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its body had been blocking the view the whole time. Mark froze. His heart was pounding, but he didn't know what else to do at the time. So he called out, his voice barely steady. Excuse me, is Granny home? Silence. The eyes didn't move. They just kept staring down at him from the shadows. Then suddenly, a voice rang out behind him. Hey, what are you doing? I thought you were looking for us. Mark spun around. It was his friends calling up at him from the 13th floor. He looked down at them, relieved for a moment. But just then, he heard it. Granny's front door, quietly shutting behind him. He turned back, but the door was now fully closed. Nothing but the flickering candle in the metal basin left. Mark hurried back to the 13th floor to rejoin his friends. Trying to act normal, he casually asked, Hey, did any of you see Granny just now? But they all shook their heads. Not one of them had seen her. When Mark got home that night, he was still a little shaken, but curiosity got the better of him. He asked his mom, Hey, have you seen the Granny from the 14th floor lately? The one who always gives us candy. His mom looked up from what she was doing, her brow furrowing. The Granny? You mean the one who always sits outside with the red bag? Mark nodded. She hesitated, then said, Mark, you won't be seeing her anymore. Unfortunately, she passed away recently. What? Mark blinked. No, that can't be. I just saw her. His mom gave him a tired look. Mark, don't make up stories now. You probably saw someone else. Don't go wandering up to her floor these next few days, okay? She turned away. And stop talking about this stuff before bed. You're going to scare yourself. As Mark got older, he started to believe that maybe the shadowy figures behind Granny that day weren't just shadows or his imagination. In Chinese folklore, there's a belief that when someone passes away, They're escorted to the afterlife by two entities known as Aotao and Ma Min. It literally translates to ox head and a horse face. These death escorts serve as enforcers from the Chinese underworld, mainly responsible for escorting wandering souls and maintain order among the spirits of the dead. They're often described as the first beings you'll encounter after death, especially if your passing was sudden or violent. Oxhead is said to be a massive figure with a muscular human body and head of an ox. It's often depicted with the large horns of a bull and often wields a trident or heavy chains. Horseface? It's equally hulking in terms of size, but instead of an ox head, it has an elongated face and the ears of a horse. It's often depicted in ancient texts as carrying a rope or a staff used to subdue spirits who resist moving on. Both are usually wearing ancient official garb or armor, and while they can appear terrifying, they're not inherently evil, as their function is to only do their job of maintaining order in the afterlife. There are numerous different reports of their sightings over the years. Their presence is always ominous, as when they show up, someone is going to die, or already has, similar to the Grim Reaper in the West. Sometimes people dream of them just before dying. As for the white candle outside Granny's unit, it was most likely put there by family or someone close to her to help guide her soul. A single white candle placed outside a home in Chinese tradition is a funeral signal. It tells neighbors and spirits alike that someone in the household has passed, and it's usually placed there for a few days after death. As the soul prepares to move on, it serves as a guiding light to help the spirit find its way out of the home and move toward the afterlife. It also is a visual cue to neighbors not to disturb the family and a way to show respect. When people see this, they usually avoid passing by too closely to the unit, especially at night. Maybe the granny wanted to pass out candy to the children one last time before her journey. What do you guys think? Do you think that Mark was seeing things that night? Did he just mistaken someone else for the granny? There were plenty of other old grannies living in Mark's building at the time. Maybe it really was just someone else he saw that night. Someone who happened to look like her, standing on the balcony with the same red plastic bag. But then, what about the two figures that Mark saw behind her? The ones standing silently in the dark? Let us know what you guys think happened that night in the comments below. Now this next story, it's pretty terrifying. It comes from someone living in Taiwan. We'll call him Mr. Yang. Mr. Yang didn't want to deal with the cramped, noisy apartments in the city. Instead, he chose to rent a village house, out in the rural outskirts. For the price, he got way more space, and a kind of quiet that's hard to find in the city. Sure, the commute to work was a little bit longer, but to Mr. Yang, it was worth it. At least, that's what he thought at first. Across the street from Mr. Yang's village house, there lived a mother and daughter. They stayed in a 3-story home. The daughter had the second floor all to herself, while the older mother lived on the ground floor. Now, the way they communicated was a bit old-fashioned. Whenever the mother needed something, she would open her window and shout up toward the second floor. And the daughter, she would do the same, yelling down toward the mother from above. So every now and then, Mr. Yang would hear their voices echoing across the road. Honestly, it got a little bit annoying sometimes, but it wasn't a constant issue. They would only occasionally do this throughout the week. Mr. Yang started to notice something early on. The mother, she never left the house. She was a bit older, so Mr. Yang assumed it's due to mobility issues. It was only the daughter who would step out now and then, maybe once or twice a week, to make quick grocery runs, just enough to stock up for the two of them. There was something off about her. People in the village said she had some kind of psychological condition. Mr. Yang never found out the specifics, but one thing was clear. She couldn't work due to this illness, and she never spoke to anyone other than her mother. Whenever Mr. Yang ran into her outside, she would just stare. No smile or words, just a cold, distant look, like she was peering right through him. And it wasn't just him, she treated everyone the same. She would also talk to herself a lot, sometimes quietly under her breath. Other times, she would start shouting nonsense to no one at all. Just nonsensible ramblings, things that didn't make any sense. Everyone in the village knew who she was and tried their best to avoid her if they saw her outside. One evening, as Mr. Yang was walking home from work, same route, same quiet street, when something unusual caught his eye. Across the road, the front door to the mother and daughter's house, it was chained shut from the outside. That wasn't there this morning, he thought. He was sure of it. It stopped him in his tracks. Uneasy, Mr. Yang hurried into his own house and asked his mother, "Hey Mom, do you know what happened across the street?" She gave him a somber look. "The old woman," she said. "She passed away." Apparently, while Mr. Yang was at work, the authorities had come. Several police officers and paramedics. They had to break down the front door just to get inside. The daughter was taken to the station for further questioning. Standard procedure, Mr. Yang figured, but still, what a tragedy. Poor girl, he thought. Everything had seemed normal just yesterday. He could still hear their voices in his head, the mother and the daughter, shouting back and forth from their windows like always. And now, just like that, the mother was gone. They were never close, but they were neighbors after all. After hearing news like this, it left a strange weight in Mr. Yang's chest. He felt bad for the poor girl. Later that night, his mom brought it up. "She's all alone now," she said quietly. "Next time we see her, we should give her some bakgam, which is funeral gift money. That might help her out in a time of need." Mr. Yang nodded. Yeah, that felt like the right thing to do. The next day after work, Mr. Yang noticed that the metal chain on the door was gone and the lights were on upstairs. He figured the daughter must be home now. That evening, over dinner, Mr. Yang brought it up to his mother again. "How shall we give the bakgam to her?" he asked. "I mean, it doesn't feel right just knocking on her door." His mother agreed. Better to wait until they saw her outside again, when she goes to get groceries, and they'll give it to her then. No need to disturb her during such a difficult time. The next day was Saturday, and Mr. Yang was home all day. He wasn't doing much, just relaxing. But he kept an eye out on the street, hoping to catch the neighbor girl, if she happened to go out. She usually did her grocery runs on the weekends, so Mr. Yang didn't want to miss the chance to hand over the bakgam gift to her. Sure enough, sometime in the afternoon, he finally saw her. She stepped out of her house, head down, walking briskly. By the time Mr. Yang got to his window, she was already halfway down the block. Too late to catch her now. But then he figured he needed a few things anyway from the store. Might as well head out too. Maybe he could catch up to her and give her the envelope there at the grocery store. At the store, Mr. Yang spotted her in the checkout line. She was buying an armful of instant noodles and microwavable meals. She was also arguing with the cashier. "I don't understand," she snapped. "How do you expect me to heat this up if there's no microwave here?" The staff looked confused. It was a grocery store after all, not a convenience store. Microwaves aren't exactly part of the service. One of the workers tried to explain, gently, that customers don't usually heat food inside the grocery store, and that's just how it works. And then, just like that, her mood flipped. She stopped shouting. Her voice turned calm, flat. "That's alright," she said. "My mother doesn't eat hot food now anyways." Mr. Yang's heart dropped when she said that. Didn't her mother just pass away? That sentence chilled him to the bone. He no longer felt comfortable walking up to her. He clutched the envelope in his pocket, but never took it out. Instead, he quietly got his own groceries and headed back home. But the moment he stepped through the door, he noticed that there were 2 police officers already inside, talking to his mother. They said they were following up with the case across the street. Given how close Mr. Yang's house was, they were hoping he or his mother might have noticed anything. How the mother and daughter got along, whether they ever heard arguing, shouting, anything unusual. As the conversation unfolded, one particular detail was said by one of the officers in passing. The old woman had already been dead for the last 7 days when they found her. Mr. Yang's eyes shot to his mother. They both exchanged a stunned look. "That can't be right," he said slowly. "My mother and I still heard them yelling outside the window just 2 days ago. If the old woman had passed away over a week ago, then who exactly had the daughter been shouting back and forth with? Was she living with a corpse that entire time? Talking to it? Arguing with it?" The officers went quiet. After a moment, they said that the rest of the case details were confidential, still under investigation, so they couldn't say more about it. They thanked Mr. Yang and his mother for their time, and left. A few days later, a van arrived. Some officials came out and quietly took the girl away. She wasn't arrested, but after speaking with a few neighbors about what happened, Mr. Yang learned that it had been decided she could no longer care for herself in her state of mind. She was sick. He never found out exactly where they took her. A facility of some kind, maybe. Somewhere she could finally receive the mental care she needed. And as for the bakgam, he never got the chance to give it to her. Instead, Mr. Yang and his mother decided to burn some joss paper and incense for the old woman outside the now empty house. They hoped they would help guide her spirit peacefully into the afterlife. But still, one question lingered, one they couldn't shake. If the mother had already passed away, then who was yelling back and forth with the daughter just days earlier? Was it possible that the old woman's spirit, knowing her daughter's fragile state, refused to leave her behind for her to be all alone? Or maybe Mr. Yang and his mother were just mistaken. Maybe they imagined it, got the timeline wrong. But then again, even if that was true, what about what the girl said at the grocery store? My mother doesn't eat hot food now anyways. What did she mean by that? What do you guys think really happened here? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed these two chilling incidents from Asia. Until we meet again next week. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we have a pretty horrifying story shared by someone from Taiwan. Have you ever heard of a haunted clinic? Well, tonight's story is exactly that. Usually, most stories that I come across that are related to healthcare usually tie back to hospitals. It's a lot more rare to hear about haunted clinics, especially dental clinics. At the end of the story, I'll dive a little deeper into the cultural aspects and what I personally think. So stick around if you're interested. This incident was reported a few years ago. The person who shared it was working as a receptionist at a dental clinic at the time. Let's call her Kathy. After graduating from college, Kathy moved to Taipei and found work at a small private dental clinic. It was nothing out of the ordinary, located on the ground floor of a mixed-use building. But there was one thing that set this clinic apart from your typical dentist's office. It had its own private basement. The basement wasn't part of the clinic's public area. It was strictly for staff, mostly used as a lounge area for when work was slow. It was a nice little perk. There was a big couch down there, a TV, a coffee machine, and other miscellaneous things, like a statue of a 1,000-hand Guanyin, Qin Sao Gunyam, next to the TV. These statues were pretty typical in places like Taiwan and Hong Kong. The basement was kind of a place where you could stretch out during a lunch break or kill some time in between patients. Kathy describes the clinic as one of the best places she has ever worked. It wasn't in the busiest part of the city, so the pace was manageable. Compared to other clinics, it felt pretty relaxed. The team got along well, the dentists were friendly and down to earth. Even the owner was extremely easygoing. He wasn't the type to micromanage. As long as things ran smoothly and the patients were cared for, he didn't really care much for the day-to-day stuff. For Kathy, it didn't feel like going to work in the usual sense. It felt more like spending the day with friends while getting paid to do so. A rare kind of atmosphere, especially in a city like Taipei. But despite how ideal the clinic seemed, things slowly began to change. It started a few years after Kathy joined, when a string of strange events started unfolding at the clinic. One day, the owner of the clinic announced that he would be out of the country for a bit, a business trip to Thailand that would keep him away for about a week. He often took trips to Thailand, so this was nothing out of the ordinary. Before leaving, he simply asked everyone to keep things running smoothly. It's worth noting, the owner was also a practicing dentist at the clinic. With him gone, his regular patients would be rescheduled or postponed until he got back. The clinic will still be open, just a little quieter than usual. There were still 3 other dentists that would still be working during this week while the owner was in Thailand, so if anything urgent came up during that time, patients would still be able to see one of the other dentists. Because things were expected to be slow for the week, the schedule was adjusted. Instead of both receptionists working together like they normally do, Kathy and her colleague Ying would be alternating shifts this week. The 2 of them were close, not just co-workers, but friends. They worked side by side for years and often hung out with each other outside of work as well. At this point, The clinic felt like a second home to both of them. One evening, Ying was closing up the clinic by herself. All of the dentists had already left for the day, and she was the last one there. She was waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up, as they had some plans for dinner, so she decided to hang around a little while longer, rather than wait outside. She pulled the metal gates at the front door down halfway, locked the glass front doors, then headed downstairs to the basement to relax and kill some time until her boyfriend arrived. Ying sank into the couch and turned on the TV. A few minutes later, she heard someone banging loudly at the metal gates upstairs. It was very loud and aggressive. Startled, she got up quickly and rushed back upstairs. She unlocked the front doors, lifted the gate up, and stepped outside to check who it was. But there was no one there. The street was quiet, except for a few people walking in the distance. She looked around again. Nothing. Probably just some kids messing around, she thought. She lowered the gate back down and returned to the basement. As she was walking back down the stairs, something immediately felt off. It was silent. She swore she left the TV on before. Once she was downstairs again, she saw that it was off. She paused. She was certain she hadn't touched the remote. In her rush to check on the noise upstairs, she just left it running. She was sure of it. Still, she told herself she must have hit the remote by accident when she got up in such a hurry, or maybe she really did turn it off before heading upstairs. It was late after all, and she was tired. Easy to forget small things like this. She sat back down and reached for the remote. Then suddenly, the lights in the basement went out. All of them. The basement was plunged into complete darkness. Ying froze for a moment, then she bolted. She ran up the stairs, through the clinic, and out the front doors, not bothering to check anything else. There was a 24-hour convenience store next door, brightly lit, and there was always someone at the counter. She went straight in and called Kathy from her phone. She didn't want to go back to the clinic alone. Kathy, who had the day off, picked up. When she heard what happened, all she could do was laugh. She called Ying a scaredy cat and said she'd be over in a few minutes. Kathy was already out running a few errands when Ying called and happened to be nearby, so she figured she might as well swing by and rescue Ying. They met outside the convenience store. Once Ying saw Kathy arrive, she came out and gave her a big hug, thanking her for coming to her rescue. Kathy just laughed again and joked, "You're lucky I was so close by, and that I'm awesome. Otherwise, you'd be on your own." "It's probably just a fuse box," Kathy said. "Something logical. Don't be such a scaredy cat." But Ying was certain it wasn't a power issue. The light switch in the basement had a very distinct sound when it flipped, a sharp, unmistakable popping noise. She remembers hearing it clearly. Someone had turned it off when she was downstairs. Kathy saw how shaken she was. Also, Ying's boyfriend just arrived, so Kathy told her to go on ahead and go to dinner and that she would help her close up quickly. Ying thanked her profusely, still rattled, and left to go to dinner with her boyfriend. Kathy entered the clinic. Almost immediately, she was hit by a really bad smell. It was sharp, rotten, the kind of stench that clings to the back of your throat. She started walking through the clinic, trying to find the source of the smell. The smell grew stronger as she approached the stairwell to the dark basement. Then she stopped. There, on the second or third step, was a huge dead rat, curled up, stiff, bloated. It looked like it had been there for a while. The question was, how did Ying miss this? She had been working in the office all day, and most likely been going up and down the stairs. This thing reeked. Kathy quickly grabbed the broom and a trash bag and disposed of the rat. Then she called to Ying. "Hey, did you leave that rat there? Didn't it stink up the whole office?" Kathy asked. Ying sounded confused. "What rat? There's no rat when I was there." Kathy didn't know what to make of it, but she was starting to get weirded out and definitely didn't feel like going to the basement tonight. She finished locking up and left to go home for the night. The next day, it was Kathy's turn to work reception. Everything was normal, a quiet day, steady stream of patients. Nothing unusual. But near closing time, as she was wrapping things up by herself, something strange happened to her too. She was counting the day's cash, getting ready to lock it in the safe. Then, the lights in the clinic went out. Not just the basement this time, like with Ying yesterday. The entire clinic went dark. Startled, Kathy dropped the stack of cash she had just been counting. She heard the bills scatter across the floor. Her first instinct was to run over to the light switch, but then she hesitated. This wasn't just pocket change. Even if just a few bills went missing, it would be hard to explain to her boss, so she decided to pick the money back up first. The clinic still had some kind of light, as the streetlights leaked in through the windows, so she could still somewhat make out what was in front of her. She knelt down and felt along the floors with her hands. Nothing. She swept her hands across the tiles. Still nothing. Panic started to rise. There had been a substantial amount of cash. It couldn't just vanish like that. So, she stood up and rushed over to the light switch. It had been flipped off. Not a fuse issue. The switch was physically turned off. So, she flipped it back on. The lights flickered, then came back to life. Kathy hurried back to the front counter and looked around the floor. The bills were nowhere to be found. Frantic, she started to look everywhere, even in places she already knew wouldn't have the cash. She opened the safe and froze. All the cash from the day was sitting right there in the center of the safe, neatly stacked in a pile. As if someone had carefully placed them there. Kathy's heart was racing. She hadn't opened the safe yet before. How could today's earnings already be sitting inside? She stared at the money for a long time. She couldn't stop thinking about what happened to Ying the night before and started getting more scared. What in the world was going on? Kathy slowly shut the safe and relocked it and left the clinic for the night. This was just the beginning of a series of events that become more and more horrifying. The strange incidents were only starting to escalate. A few days passed without anything weird happening. The owner came back from Thailand and resumed operations as usual. He also decided to expand the team, hiring a few new dentists, many of them similar in age as Kathy and Ying. The atmosphere in the clinic shifted again. It felt livelier. And with the owner back, both Kathy and Ying were back on their normal schedule of working together again. One evening as they were winding down for the night, Kathy suggested they eat dinner at the office before heading home. Dr. Chen, one of the new dentist hires, was still around, so the three of them decided to order some fried chicken and eat together in the basement lounge. They spread the food out on the table and sat around chatting casually as they feasted. It was a relaxed evening. They talked about current events, small gossip, nothing serious. Dr. Chen was generous and treated them for the meal, and both Kathy and Ying were in good spirits. Then, out of nowhere, Dr. Chen asked them a strange question. Hey, do you guys believe that there's another world, one beyond the one that we live in? The wording was vague, but Kathy understood what he meant. He was talking about Yamgan, the spirit world. She nodded and told him that she believes in ghosts and the supernatural. Dr. Chen looked relieved. Then he began to share something that he hadn't talked about before. He explained that his parents owned a temple in the countryside, and that growing up, he witnessed a lot of strange things related to the paranormal. So even before he joined this clinic, he was unusually attuned to certain feelings. He said that he often felt drained, more tired than usual when he worked here. But it was worse here in the basement. Anytime he came down here, there was a strange heaviness in the air. Then he mentioned something that happened earlier this week. It was a quiet day, no patients. Only he and Ying were in the clinic at the time. He brought his PlayStation from home and hooked it up to the TV in the basement. He figured it would be a good way to kill some time in between patients. He was sitting on the couch, casually playing his game, when he suddenly felt really tired. He paused the game and laid back for a moment, intending to just rest his eyes for a few minutes. That's when he quickly fell asleep. But it wasn't a normal sleep. It felt like he was caught between being awake and dreaming. He was paralyzed, but aware. Then he heard Ying calling him from upstairs. "Dr. Chen, there's a patient here for you. Can you please come up?" Her voice was clear, but something wasn't right. Dr. Chen tried to respond, tried to get up from the couch, but something was wrong. He couldn't move at all. His limbs wouldn't respond. His body felt heavy, locked in place. He felt awake, he was sure of that, but it didn't feel like an ordinary wakefulness. He was being suspended between sleep and consciousness, a foggy middle state where time moved strangely. His eyes darted around the room. That much he could still do. Then he heard it. A soft, eerie laughing sound. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere next to the TV. The sound was faint at first, but there was something unnatural about it. Then, from the far edge of the room, A human-shaped shadow began to emerge. It moved slowly. It looked as if it was dancing, its arms and hands twisting in ways that reminded him of traditional Southeast Asian dances. Deliberate, stylized. It didn't speak, but its presence was overwhelming. It made the air feel thick and heavy. Dr. Chen remained frozen on the couch, forced to watch. The shadow continued its dance, inching closer and closer to his face, and as it neared, the details began to sharpen. Though the figure remained mostly a silhouette, its face started to take form the closer it got. It was a woman. He could see her exaggerated makeup, most notably the eyebrows, drawn thick and high above her eyes in a stylized fashion, similar to those seen in traditional Chinese or Thai opera. The figure came even closer. She wore thick red lipstick. The corners of her mouth were curled upward. It wasn't a natural smile. It looked painted on, stretched too far, as if someone had carved it into her face. From her lips came a strange sound, something like laughter, but distorted, repetitive. Dr. Chen couldn't describe it, but it was unlike any sound he's ever heard before. He was drenched in sweat at this point from fear, completely paralyzed, heart racing, trapped in silence as this thing came within inches from his face. Then, a sudden tap on Dr. Chen's shoulder. Everything snapped back. It was as if he was released. He inhaled for air and jolted upright, eyes wide with fear. Ying was standing next to him, startled by his reaction. "Dr. Chen," she said, stepping back. "I've been calling you for a while. The patient's waiting. Why are you just laying here, zoning out?" He looked around. The shadow woman was gone. He asked Ying if she saw anything when she came down. Ying shook her head, confused. "No," she said. "I just saw you laying there with your eyes open, like you were spaced out." As Dr. Chen finished his story, the mood in the basement shifted. Kathy and Ying exchanged glances. They were starting to feel uneasy, and truthfully, a little annoyed. Why would he share something like this now, while they were still in the same basement, still sitting on the same couch where he had seen this figure just days ago? But Dr. Chen didn't seem to be able to read the room. He continued. After the incident, he said, he had called his dad later that night. His dad, the one that ran the temple back in his hometown, listened quietly as Dr. Chen described what happened. Then he gave his advice. He told Dr. Chen to wear the talisman he had given him. As long as he wore that talisman while at work, everything would be fine. Just wear the talisman, and nothing would be able to follow him. A couple of weeks later, Dr. Chen resigned. He had accepted a new offer from a different clinic, one that would bring him closer to his parents in his hometown. It wasn't unusual for dentists to move around often, but still, something about the timing felt off to Kathy. Most dentists usually work longer than a few weeks at a new company before making the jump. And after hearing what he experienced in the basement, she couldn't help but wonder if that had something to do with the sudden departure. After he left, things stayed quiet for a little bit. For a few days, nothing unusual happened. Then came a scheduled wisdom tooth extraction. The patient had been booked in advance, but the dentist that was assigned to the procedure had a sudden family emergency. The surgery was postponed, and the patient had already been notified. Kathy saw it as an opportunity. It was going to be a slow day, so she decided to bring her puppy to the clinic. Everyone was going to be pretty free anyway today, so she figured her coworkers would be able to play with the puppy in the lounge. Her coworkers loved the idea. They could take turns playing with it in the basement. Kathy, of course, had to stay at the reception desk, but she brought her dog's toys and even her pet camera from home to put in the basement, so she could keep an eye on him while working upstairs. Everyone had a great time. The dog was calm, no strange reactions or weird behaviors, surprisingly, nothing unusual at all. That night, after getting home, Kathy realized she left the pet camera in the clinic's basement. For a moment, she considered going back to grab it, but the clinic was already locked up for the night, so it would be safe there until morning. So she left it and went to bed. At around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. A notification popped up on her phone. Movement detected on PetCam. Half asleep, she squinted at the screen. She frowned. The office was closed and fully locked. Was this a glitch? Or worse, had someone broken in? Now, fully awake, she opened the app to check the camera feed. The screen was dark, but the camera's night vision was active, bathing everything in a green light. She saw the basement lounge. It was empty. Nothing was out of place. But she noticed something. The TV was on. Its glow lit up the room, casting flickering light across the walls, making the feed a little brighter and easier to see. That's strange, Kathy thought, sitting up now while staring at her phone. Why is the TV on? Then she noticed something else in the corner of the room. Something moved. A figure. It wasn't walking. It looked like it was dancing. Slow, deliberate movements. Fluid and strange. Too stylized to be random. Kathy tapped on the screen and pinched to zoom in. The figure turned around, as if it noticed someone was watching. It looked straight into the camera. Kathy nearly dropped her phone. The shadowy face was faint but clear. Painted lips curled upward in a smile that was too wide. Eyebrows drawn in exaggerated strokes, just like Dr. Chen had described. The figure stepped closer to the camera. Kathy watched, frozen, as it approached the camera until its face filled the frame. Then, it began to make a sound. Kathy wanted to shut the app. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Then, in the background, she saw something else. More shadows. They were all dancing too. All of them performing the same twisted, ritualistic motions, dancing in silence. Only now did Kathy realize, whatever was in the basement, it wasn't just one entity. There were many. Kathy couldn't watch anymore. She shut the app and set the phone down. But sleep wasn't coming back. Not after that. She lay in bed, eyes open, mind racing, trying to make sense of what she just saw. Those movements, that face, the others behind it. By morning, she wanted to call in sick. She couldn't imagine going to the clinic, not with the image of that figure still burned in her mind. But she didn't have a choice. The owner was scheduled to work today. Everyone had to be present. Part of her hoped that maybe, with the owner being in the office today, they could finally talk about it, lay everything out in the open, because by now, the unease in the clinic wasn't just hers. Other staff seemed to be experiencing things as well. Everyone had started to grow nervous, quietly but noticeably. The strange tension was building. That afternoon, with the owner present, Kathy shared everything. Her own experience, Ying's, Dr. Chen's story, and also what she saw the night before on the camera feed. She spoke carefully, but she didn't hold anything back. When she finished, the room was quiet. Ying looked pale. She didn't say anything at first, but quietly admitted later on that she was seriously considering quitting at that moment. She wasn't joking. Then, one by one, a few of the dentists began to speak up. They hadn't experienced anything direct, but a few of them had seen something, just for a second, while lounging in the basement. A figure, moving in the corner of their vision. None of them had mentioned it before, until now. But every time they looked directly, it was gone. When Kathy decided to share everything in front of the entire staff, she wasn't sure how the owner would react. It was a big risk. If he didn't believe in the supernatural, or worse, thought she was causing trouble, there was a real chance he would accuse her of spreading fear and making up stories to stir up panic among his employees. But to her surprise, he didn't say a word. He just listened quietly. As staff took turns speaking about things they'd seen, the feelings they had, he stood quietly, taking it all in. Then, without explanation, he stepped outside and made a really long phone call. No one knew who he was speaking to. When he returned, he didn't go back in the group. Instead, he went straight to the basement. A few minutes later, he came back up, carrying something out. He wrapped it tightly in newspapers. It was about the size of a vase. He didn't explain what it was. He simply walked out of the clinic with it. Then, he returned again. This time, with red envelopes with money in it. One to each staff member. He handed them all out quietly and apologized to everyone for the inconvenience. That was all. No speech, no explanations. But everyone understood. If he didn't believe something was going on, he wouldn't have apologized, and he definitely wouldn't have given them all a red envelope with lucky money. The mood shifted. Now, everyone wanted to know, what did he remove from the basement? He didn't answer those questions that day. He simply told everyone to go home early. The clinic would be closing for the rest of the day, and that he would have a better explanation for everyone soon. Ying and Kathy went out to dinner for the evening, trying to make sense of it all. Ying was convinced it had to be the thousand-hand Guanyin statue, the one that sat in the basement on the altar next to the TV cabinet. Either way, they figured they would find out the next day. The next day, there were still no updates from the owner, and he was nowhere to be found. Many were still unsettled. Some had considered quitting. The patients were already booked, and the clinic was fully scheduled that day. So, all the staff did come back to work. They did their jobs quietly and professionally, but as soon as their last appointments wrapped up, all of the dentists went home. One by one, they packed up and left quickly. By the end of the day, the clinic was quiet again. Empty, except for Kathy and Ying, alone in the office. They were closing up for the day, as usual. Once the cash was counted and locked in the safe, Ying turned to Kathy. "Hey," she asked quietly, "did you go down to the basement at all today?" Kathy shook her head. "Not really, only quickly this morning, just to get changed," she said. Same for Ying. Neither of them had really looked around. Ying glanced at the stairwell. "I've been wondering, what did the boss take out yesterday?" They both paused. Neither wanted to go down alone, but they needed to. Their bags, shoes, and belongings were still down there, so they went down together. They moved quickly, neither of them wanting to linger too long. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but then they looked toward the TV. The small altar next to it was now empty. The thousand-hand Guanyin Qinzhou Gunyam statue, the one that had always sat there, was gone. That's what the owner had taken out. Kathy noticed something unusual. Hanging on the coat rack was a white dental coat. She stepped closer. The name tag stitched above the pocket read, Dr. Chen. He must have left it behind when he left the company, but something else caught her eye. A piece of paper was sticking out of one of the pockets, just barely visible. Without thinking, she reached for it and put it into her own pocket. Ying and Kathy were too uneasy to stay down there any longer. They hurried back upstairs. As they stepped outside into the fading light of the early evening, Kathy finally pulled out the paper. She unfolded it. It wasn't a note like she originally thought. It was a drawing, a rough, hand-drawn sketch. It was of a figure shown from the waist up, dressed in ornate, traditional Thai theater attire, complete with the elaborate headgear. The details were hasty, but clear enough. But what stood out the most was a large X scribbled across the figure, as if Dr. Chen had crossed it out in frustration or fear after drawing it. Kathy stared at it, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She instantly regretted taking it. Why did she grab it? She didn't want to keep looking at it. She folded it back up and was about to say something when Ying suddenly stopped in her tracks. "Shoot," she said, patting her pockets. "I left my phone in the patient room. I think it's on the tray by the chair. I must have left it there after I was done sanitizing the chair. Let me run back in real quick." Kathy nodded and waited by the door as Ying went back inside. A few seconds later, she heard it. Kathy rushed back in, heart pounding. She found Ying crouched just outside the patient room, hands over her face, shaking. Kathy dropped to her side and helped her up. "What happened?" Ying didn't speak at first. She just kept pointing toward the dental chair in the center of the room. Kathy looked. It was empty. But Ying wouldn't stop scanning the room, her eyes darting from the chair to the corners to the walls. There was a woman, she whispered. She was sitting in the chair. Her mouth was wide open, like she was getting a procedure done. But she looked right at me, and she started smiling. Kathy didn't wait to ask any more. She grabbed Ying's phone from the counter, and the two of them ran out as fast as they could. That night, Kathy messaged some of the dentists that they were close with. Word spread quickly, and the response was immediate. No one wanted to come back to the clinic. All of the dentists canceled their upcoming appointments. The strange part? No one could reach the owner. Calls went unanswered. Messages were never replied to. For Ying and Kathy, that was the final straw. The statue might have been removed, but clearly something was still very wrong. If the owner wasn't going to speak up, if he didn't care enough to explain, then why should any of them return to work? No one went in the next few days. Then finally, a message came through from the owner. He asked everyone to please come in the next morning. He said he would meet them there in person and give them a proper explanation for everything. No one knew what to expect, but the next morning, everyone came in as requested. One by one, they filed back into the clinic. And there, waiting inside, was the owner, looking stressed. Looks like he lost some weight. The circle under his eyes were darker, as if he hadn't slept in days. It was clear that he didn't want to say what he was about to say, but at this point, he really had no choice. Everyone stood in silence as he began. He explained that by most standards, he was considered successful. This clinic wasn't his only one. He owned several. He had started from nothing and built it all the way from the ground up. But success has a way of changing people. Once you get a taste of it, you want more. He wanted to keep growing, expanding his clinics, building his network, meeting people who could help push him further. It was during one of his trips to Thailand that someone introduced him to a powerful shaman who claimed that he could help. Not through business plans or strategy, through something else, something much darker. The practice is known in Cantonese as Yuan Guai Cai. It means raising little ghosts. That's like the literal translation. But it doesn't always have to do with raising infant ghosts. It's much broader than that. It's a taboo ritual still whispered about in parts of Asia, where this practice still takes place. It's considered to be dark magic, as a shaman summons spirits, binds them, and used them to bring wealth, among many other things. The owner didn't take it lightly, but he was tired. He spent years grinding day in, day out just to build what he had, and now, here was someone offering him a much easier path. It sounded like a cheat code to success, so he agreed to hire the shaman to help him get even richer. A ritual was performed, offerings were made, and at first, it really worked. Business picked up. Appointments filled out, revenue climbed. Everything was going smoothly, at least in the beginning. But as the money started pouring in, the shaman wanted more and more money for his services. The owner started to regret his decision in hiring the shaman in the first place. Business was booming, patients were booking, profits were rising. So why? So why keep paying the shaman more and more each time for help he no longer believed he needed? He fired the shaman. Just to note, this is extremely dangerous. Ghosts raised through such rituals require constant offerings and ritual respects. If these stop, things can go very wrong very quickly. And this is when the strange events started to happen. At first, it was small things in his own personal life, arguments at home, minor health scares. Then came the sightings. The owner started having nightmares every single night. Then came the strange events in the basement at the clinic. The 1,000-hand Guanyin statue, Qinzao Gunyam statue, the one that used to sit beside the TV in the basement, wasn't just decoration. It had been part of the shaman's original instructions. It was a spiritual anchor, a vessel. It was meant to house the spirits the shaman had invited in. But when things started spiraling, the owner panicked. He removed the statue and flew back to Thailand to beg the shaman for help. The shaman took one look at the statue and refused. He said it was too late. The spirits were not kept in check for too long. The dominant entity had been absorbing and feeding off the weaker ones over time, getting stronger and becoming more malevolent. This was no simple matter to resolve anymore. The owner stood before the staff and promised he'd sort everything out, but everyone listening knew better. They could see it in his face, the strain, the desperation. And things didn't improve since the last time they spoke. It was only getting worse. He began talking about future expansions, bigger plans, new clinics. He promised everyone raises if they stayed. Empty words. He also gave everyone a month off with pay, claiming he needed time to renovate the office and deal with logistics. During that month off, Kathy and Ying quietly found new jobs. And when the clinic reopened, they never went back. Over time, they heard whispers from people still connected to the owner. Everything had continued to unravel in his life. His wife divorced him. His son cut off contact. His health began to get worse. Several of his clinics shut down, resulting in major financial losses. Whatever wealth, status, and success he had before, it all vanished, almost overnight. And as for the spirits, Kathy and Ying never really got a full explanation of what or who they were. Maybe they're still there in the basement of that clinic. Or maybe they followed the owner. But one thing is clear. The owner opened the door he was never meant to touch. and it cost him everything. So, what do you guys think happened here to Kathy's boss? Was it greed, karma, or something far more sinister? Did the shaman do this on purpose? A curse, maybe? To extract more money? It's said in Chinese tradition that once these ghosts from Yuan Guaizai taste freedom, it's very, very difficult to contain them again. So if you ever go to parts of the world where things like this exist, always think twice before agreeing to anything. Okay, so now I wanted to share more information regarding the cultural side of things from the story and what I think happened. I know this is a very deep topic in itself, with multiple layers we could dive into, but we'll just cover some of the general basics for some of you who've never heard of this at all. First, what does Yuan Guaizai even mean? In Cantonese, Yuan means raise, to nourish, Guai means ghost, and Zai means child, son, or little one. So the translation is raising ghost child. So this is actually a type of black magic, in which a spirit, often a fetus, stillborn child, or other young ghost, is ritually bound to a person to serve them, with the goal of bringing wealth, luck, protection, or even sometimes vengeance. Though the phrase includes the word child in it, it's more of a catch-all phrase referring to the deliberate ritual of raising ghosts. The child part of the phrase emphasizes the idea that the spirit must be taken care of, like a dependent being. Not all of the ghosts used are literal children. The cultural origin of this phrase originated with the fetal or child ghosts. It's since evolved, and over time people began using this term to refer to any dark pact involving spirits, regardless of the age of the ghost. Today, even adult spirits summoned for fortune or revenge can fall under this umbrella term. This is one of the most taboo and deeply feared practices, rooted in many parts of Asia, especially Hong Kong, southern China, Thailand, and many parts of Malaysia and Taiwan. In Kathy's story, her boss met with a shaman in Thailand, who pretty much acted as a spiritual intermediary to raise or control the ghost on Kathy's boss's behalf. The spirits were bound to Kathy's boss through the shaman. The Gunyam statue in the clinic became the anchor or vessel where the spirits resided. This is very typical in Yuan Guaizai cases, where a container, a doll, an urn, or even a statue is used to house the ghosts. Traditionally speaking, Gunyam is considered a pure, benevolent, and protective deity, so how can it be used as a vessel for something that's the total opposite? Generally, Gunyam statues are sacred vessels meant to repel or purify spiritual negativity, not house them. But it goes much deeper than this. Just because the statue is of a deity, it doesn't always mean that it's protected. It's not about the statue, but what people do with the statue. If the Gunyam statue is not consecrated, in Cantonese, this is Hoi Gong, or opening the light. It means it was never properly blessed by a proper monk or Taoist priest to invite a deity or spiritual energy to inhabit the physical object. Most of the time, it's just that, a statue. It's unoccupied, and when it's unoccupied, it can be involved in taboo rituals, like the case with Kathy's boss. An unconsecrated statue of a deity holds no divine presence, but most people still treat them with respect. In many Southeast Asian occult practices, especially in Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia, it's not unheard of for people to misuse sacred icons to hide the black magic, using Buddha or Gunyam statues as camouflage for spirit-holding objects. Kathy's boss did something extremely dangerous, which was breaking the pact he entered with the shaman. In Yuan Guaizai tradition, ghosts raised through such rituals require constant offerings, obedience, and ritual respect. Once this stops, they may turn vengeful. Once that happens, and the spirits are not kept in check, whatever blessings the ghost originally provided, it can just as easily take back, and instead, provide devastation. Because of Kathy's boss's actions, everything he valued ended up being attacked. I don't really think he knew exactly what he was getting himself into when he agreed to the whole thing. We also have no idea what types of spirits the shaman was binding to him. From the description, it's possible that it was a powerful Thai spirit from traditional performance culture, not just some random lost soul. She could have been a vengeful spirit, far older and stronger than anyone realized. There's a Chinese saying that translates to, "It's easy to invite spirits, it's hard to send them away." And I think that perfectly reflects the concept of Yuan Guaizai. Power gained unnaturally always demands a price. Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we have two terrifying accounts that both take place in Japan. For many Hong Kongers, Japan is a popular tourist destination since it's so close by. These two stories are shared by two different Hong Kong tourists in Japan. After each story, I'll share a little bit about what I personally think happened. If you have any thoughts, please do the same in the comments below. Let's dive right in. Our first story comes from a woman. We'll call her Tina. This particular incident happened to her in the early 2000s. At the time, Tina was engaged. The wedding was coming up soon, and with everything about to change, she decided to take one last short trip with her mom. Just the two of them. A quiet getaway to Hakone, Japan. She figured once she gets married, she wouldn't have as much time to take as many mother-daughter trips, so why not make the most of it now? They picked an onsen town. Not one of those flashy tourist spots, just a small place tucked in the hills. It wasn't peak season, so most of the hotels they looked at were quite affordable. Tina and her mom found a little inn run by an older couple. Nothing fancy, but the photos showed tatami rooms, steaming onsens, and a beautiful view of the forest. The photos of the inn were beautiful. It seemed peaceful. And at the time, that's exactly what they were looking for, to get away from the hustle and bustle of Hong Kong. After checking in, Tina and her mom brought their luggage up to the room. It was simple, but cozy. Sliding paper doors, futons on the floor. They decided to head straight down to the onsen. The indoor onsen was on the first floor, tucked at the end of a long, narrow hallway. The lights buzzed softly overhead as they made their way down. The corridor had that quiet stillness you only get in older inns, where sound seems to vanish the moment you stop talking. The baths were separated by gender. Inside, it was warm and humid. The room was lit by the orange glow of the setting sun, filtering through a wide glass window that looked out toward the hillside. Tina had been looking forward to this part. She imagined soaking in the hot water while watching the sunset. Perfect moment of peace before dinner. It was a nice surprise. The whole onsen was empty. It was just Tina and her mom. They loved it. They had the whole area to themselves, where they could really relax and take in the views. In the center of the bath area, there was a large rectangular bath next to the big glass window, overlooking the forest and hills outside. The sun was already setting, so the sky was a beautiful orange-pink color. Tina and her mom slipped into the bath and eased themselves into the water side by side. The heat wrapped around them almost immediately. The muscles softened. The breath slowed. The sun hovered low on the horizon, painting the room in gold. Through the wide glass window, they could see trees swaying gently in the wind, blurred slightly by the steam rising off the water. Tina and her mom chatted about the upcoming wedding ceremony and joked around like they normally do. They were close. When the sun finally disappeared, they decided to try out the other baths in the area. There was a smaller one at the far end, which was extremely hot. It was almost unbearable. There was another, tucked near a stone wall, which was more like an ice plunge. It was way too cold. Eventually, they returned to the main rectangular bath. The temperature was just perfect, just enough to lull the body into stillness without putting you to sleep. Tina leaned back against the edge, arms stretched out, her gaze flicking lazily between her mom and the trees outside. It was almost fully dark now. The view through the window was just dark shapes, trunks and branches under a faint glow of outdoor lights. That's when something strange happened. A sudden rush of cold water current brushed against Tina's left side. It felt like someone pouring a bucket of ice-cold water into the bath. At first, she thought she imagined it, but then her mom shifted too, her shoulders tensing as the same chill passed her. They turned to each other at the same time, a silent look, a shared question. Did you feel that? They both scanned the water. Maybe there was a jet nearby, some kind of hidden pipe that released cooler water to regulate the temperature. But the surface was still. They ran their hands through the water, gently feeling around the edges of the bath. No streams, no hidden jets. The water should have been evenly heated, but that pocket of cold water kept brushing against them as if something had moved through and disturbed the warmth. They exchanged another glance, unease creeping in now, but still saying nothing. Then, Tina froze. Someone else was in the room. She hadn't heard the door open, neither had her mom. But there, in the same bath, in the far corner, There was a woman sitting on the ledge with only her feet in the water. Her posture was still, sitting upright. She was facing the same direction as they were, gazing out the large window into the night. Tina blinked. When did someone come in? She and her mom had been talking and looking around the whole time. They would have noticed someone walking past and joining them in the bath. The woman had long black hair. It hung down over one shoulder, slightly damp at the ends. Tina couldn't see her face clearly, only her side profile. But her face was pretty white, as if she had lots of makeup on. She wasn't moving, just sitting there, staring at the darkness beyond the glass. Then, without turning, the woman began to sing in a really low voice, barely above a whisper. A soft Japanese melody, slow, almost like a lullaby. The sound echoed gently against the tile walls. It didn't seem cheerful or relaxing at all. It made Tina and her mom uneasy. Tina opened her mouth, about to whisper something to her mom, but her mom cut her off gently, her voice calm. "Hey," she said, "I think we've soaked enough, right, Tina? Why don't we head back up and get ready for dinner, yeah?" Tina caught the look in her mom's eyes. That wasn't a question, but a signal that it was time to go, without looking rude in case the woman heard. Tina shut her mouth and gave a small nod. Neither of them said anything more. They rose slowly, the water rippling around them as they made their way to the edge of the bath. And as they moved further away from the woman, the water began to feel warmer again. Tina told herself it was nothing. The woman must have been another guest. Maybe she slipped in while Tina and her mom were chatting and neither of them noticed. Tina's mom was a bit older, and she needed to use the bathroom badly before they headed out of the bath area. She's been holding it while she was in the bath, so she couldn't wait until she got back to the room, so she quickly went to the bathroom section. As Tina waited for her mom, she walked over to the showers to rinse off. Steam clung to the air around her, soft and thick. The room still carried the warmth of the bath. Tina wasn't ready to leave yet, not completely. As she rinsed, she turned back toward the bath, just a glance. The woman was gone. Tina paused. No sound, no movement. Just the surface of the water, calm and empty. Maybe she left. The room was silent again. Tina stood there for a moment. Then she stepped back into the main rectangular bath. Just for a few minutes more, she told herself. Her mom was still in the bathroom. No harm in staying to soak just for a few minutes more. She eased herself in, the heat wrapping around her again. But this time, she scanned the whole room carefully. She checked the smaller baths, the corners, and the benches. No one. She was sure now. The woman had left. Tina floated back toward her old spot and leaned against the edge, arms stretched out again, eyes drifting up to the window. The trees outside were still, black shapes against a darker sky. Everything felt quiet again, almost peaceful. That's when she saw it. About 2 feet from her left hand, something was in the water. Something black, like seaweed, was floating there. Then it floated upward, slowly, as if rising from the bottom of the bath. Tina leaned forward. It was hair. Long strands drifting just beneath the surface, rising, spiraling, slowly taking shape. Then, a face broke the surface. Eyes wide, mouth closed, staring right at her. It was the same woman that was sitting on the ledge of the bath before. Tina's breath caught in her throat. Her heart kicked into her chest. She screamed. Loud, raw, no words at first, just panic. She splashed backwards, hands clawing at the bath's edge, trying to pull herself up. Her voice cracked as she shouted for her mom. By the time her mom rushed in, Tina was already halfway out of the bath, her hands shaking. "Mom, there's a ghost in the onsen." Her voice broke. Her legs felt like they'd forgotten how to move. Her mom grabbed her and pulled her out. It's okay, she said. "You're okay. There's nothing there." Tina turned around. The bath was empty. The water still. They didn't rinse off this time. Didn't say another word. They grabbed their towels, quickly ran to the changing area, and got dressed as fast as they could, then ran out of there. Tina and her mom burst out of the onsen into the hallway, still shaking. Their hair was still dripping wet. The cold hallway air hit their skin, but neither of them noticed. They didn't get far before someone saw them. A chef, mid-30s, in a white coat, stepped out from a side door carrying a serving tray. He stopped in his tracks when he saw them. Their faces must have said enough. He set down the tray and hurried over, concern written all over his face. In broken Japanese and panicked English, Tina tried to explain. Something in the bath, a woman, the face, the water. The chef's expression shifted. His eyes widened slightly, like he'd heard this before. He didn't say much, just pulled out his phone and called someone immediately. A few hushed sentences. Then he looked back at them. "Please wait, someone is coming." Tina and her mom stood by the wall, wrapped in thin towels, heart still pounding. Neither of them spoke. A few minutes later, a woman arrived. She wasn't wearing a uniform, just a cardigan and long skirt. But the chef stepped back when she appeared, nodding with quiet respect. She looked older, late 60s maybe. The woman approached with a slight bow and apologized. Tina, still shaken, asked a question that had been burning in her chest. Who was that in the bath? The older woman paused. She was surprisingly very open and honest about the whole thing, as if this has happened before. She told him the story in an almost matter-of-fact tone. Many years ago, there was a young woman who worked at this inn, part of the cleaning staff. She was quiet and kept to herself. She had problems at home. Everyone knew it, but no one knew what to do, and didn't want to interfere with her personal life. She often came to work with bruises and cuts, which she always tried to cover up with a ton of makeup. One day, when she was scheduled to be off from work, she showed up anyway. She walked into the onsen alone and sat on the edge of the bath with her feet in the water, staring out the big window. Some of the staff had seen her that day. They were surprised. She was supposed to be off. Someone asked her why she had come in. She just said, "I needed to get away from my husband." Then she added, "I never want to go home again." No one pressed her. Later that afternoon, she walked out into the woods behind the hotel, the same forest visible through the onsen's wide glass window. She never came back. They found her there, hanging from one of the trees, right where the bath looks out. Tina and her mom stood frozen in the hallway as the old woman finished the story. The air felt colder now, the silence heavier. Tina didn't want to spend another second in the building. She asked quietly if they could leave, check out early, but it was already late. The trains had stopped. The town was already asleep. The old woman understood. She bowed deeply again and apologized. Then she offered them a different room, one of the larger, more private suites, far from the onsen. She told them not to worry, that nothing else will happen to them. The new room was beautiful, a spacious tatami room with sliding doors and soft lantern light. There was even a private onsen on the balcony, steam rising gently under the moonlight. But neither of them used it. They didn't turn on the bath, didn't sit by the window. They were too scared. Tina didn't want to ever see what she saw in that onsen downstairs again. But the old woman was right. Nothing else happened. This was the only time in Tina's life where she experienced something like this, but it's something she will never forget. So, what do you guys think happened to Tina and her mom here at the onsen in Japan? Could it be possible that their long exposure to the hot water, especially after traveling, triggered some sort of hallucination? I personally don't think Tina and her mom were hallucinating, and that what they actually came across was a Japanese ghost, a spirit of a woman who passed suddenly and violently, and with overwhelming emotional pain. Her spirit most likely lingered, reliving some of her final moments at the end, before everything ended. Many Chinese and Japanese beliefs, spirits who pass in pain or shame may roam until they are acknowledged or helped. They may appear to people who are empathetic, emotionally open, or spiritually unguarded. These encounters aren't always aggressive, but deeply unsettling. Tina was on a personal, emotional trip with her mother, thinking about her own future, family, and change. That emotional openness might have made her more receptive to the ghost. The cold water she felt could be the spirit's energy moving through the space. Yin energy, yumhei, disturbing the warm bath. So why did the spirit only approach Tina after her mom went to the bathroom? The ghost only approaches Tina when she returns alone, perhaps hoping for someone to notice her, or relive her final moments with a witness. Spirits, especially those tied to emotional trauma, often choose their moment. Being alone often makes a person more spiritually exposed, like lowering your defenses. When Tina was with her mom, she was relaxed, distracted, and emotionally buffered. The spirit might have lingered nearby, but chose not to approach. Once her mom left, Tina was isolated, emotionally raw, and in a space tied to death and sorrow. That's when the spirit chose to acknowledge her and approached, sensing Tina was now more susceptible. In Chinese and Southeast Asian belief, certain people, especially elders or mothers, carry a natural yang energy that wards off spirits. Tina's mom may not have realized it, but her presence could have given the ghost some hesitation on approaching. Tina's mother was decisive, pulling Tina out of the bath the moment she felt something was off. Her calm but firm energy might have unconsciously pushed back against the ghost's influence, keeping the encounter from escalating at that moment. The moment she left Tina alone, the protective barrier was gone. In a lot of Cantonese stories, it's common for a parent or elder to unknowingly block a haunting with a strong presence or intuition, sometimes called Yonghei Chong. But ultimately, I don't think the spirit meant any harm. Alright, let's move on to our second incident for today. This one also comes from a Hong Konger who took a short vacation to Japan. The story was shared by a man named Tim. Tim works in HR at a mid-sized company in Hong Kong. After him and his team wrapped up a stressful internal restructure, the department finally hit their targets, and upper management decided to reward the team with a short retreat. 4 days, 3 nights in the Japanese countryside, quiet, remote, and filled with onsens. The plan was simple: rest, soak, and get some much-deserved relaxation. That's what Tim was expecting, a quiet, well-deserved break. But what actually happened was the complete opposite. The hotel was tucked deep in the countryside, surrounded by trees and mountains. There was no train station nearby, no bus stop, and only one tiny convenience store, about 10 minutes away on foot. Cell reception was weak. The building itself was made entirely of wood, old, creaky, but beautifully kept. It had the feeling of a traditional inn that had been standing quietly next to the mountain for decades. Despite its age, everything inside was spotless: neatly folded towels and tatami mats that looked freshly cleaned. At check-in, they were greeted by an elderly couple who ran the place, soft-spoken, polite, and clearly very proud of their little hotel. Everyone was in good spirits. For most of them, it was their first time going on a company trip, and the mood was light the moment they arrived. After such a stressful project, Tim had been looking forward to this. No meetings, no reports, just a few slow days in the countryside. He pictured himself soaking in the hot springs, chatting over mahjong games late at night with his coworkers, and enjoying the rare silence away from the city. The hotel wasn't perfect, a little dated, and the lighting in the halls were pretty dim, but it had everything they needed. The rooms were comfortable, the baths were clean, and most importantly, it was quiet. The hallway that led to the guest rooms was lined with old paintings. Most of them were traditional landscapes: mountains, rivers, old temples, faded but harmless. By the time everyone had settled into their rooms, night had already fallen. Some of the team decided to head out for a short walk, curious to explore the quiet little town. Others, worn out from the weekend of travel, stayed in and took a nap. Tim had made up his mind. All he wanted to do was soak in the onsen. He headed downstairs alone, glad to have it to himself. None of the others were interested yet, which made it even better. The outdoor bath was empty when he arrived. Steam rising in thick clouds from the surface of the water. The air was cold, sharp against his skin, but the water was hot. Almost too hot at first. He slid in slowly, the heat wrapping around him like a blanket. There was no sound, except the soft rush of running water and the faint rustle of the trees nearby. He leaned his head back against the edge, placed a damp towel over his face, and let his muscles relax. For the first time in weeks, he felt calm. A few minutes passed. Then, suddenly, someone yanked his leg. It wasn't a gentle tug. It was fast and violent, enough to make his upper body jerk forward and nearly dipped his face into the water. The towel slipped from his forehead. His heart was racing. He looked around immediately, water sloshing as he turned. "What the heck?" he muttered, expecting to see one of his coworkers laughing nearby. But the onsen was empty, just steam rising and swirling into the cold night air. Tim stood up to scan the area, behind the rocks, near the changing area, but there was no one there. A chill ran through him, and not from the wind. He grabbed a dry towel, wrapped it around himself, and made his way quickly back to his room, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was a cramp or the way he moved. But back in his room as he dried off, he noticed something that made him stop. On the lower part of his leg, the one that had just been pulled earlier, were 3 distinct scratch marks, faint but deep enough to break the skin. As if someone had dragged their fingernails straight across it. Did someone try to drag me under? Tim wondered as he looked at the scratches on his leg. But he didn't dwell on it for long. He put on his pajamas, lay down on his futon, and tried to convince himself it was nothing, just a strange moment in a strange place. He didn't bring it up with the others, fearing no one would believe him. By morning, things felt normal again. After breakfast, the group set out to visit a nearby temple, one of the oldest in the region, tucked away in the mountains above the town. The locals told them it had a long history, and since they were in the area, they figured it would be a nice way to spend the day. Make an offering, wish for health, luck, maybe another strong year ahead for work. But the moment Tim stepped through the temple gates, something felt wrong. A wave of dizziness hit him suddenly. His stomach twisted. The smell of the incense, which usually calmed him, only made it worse. He blinked hard, trying to steady himself. Maybe I ate something bad, he thought. But the nausea didn't feel like food poisoning. It felt deeper, like his body was pushing back against something. Still, he didn't want to ruin the mood. He followed the others, kept his head down, and forced himself to walk. But halfway through the temple grounds, he couldn't hold it anymore. He slipped away from the group and found the restroom. Inside, he leaned over the sink and vomited hard. What came out didn't make any sense. It wasn't food. It wasn't bile. It was a thick, grayish, black sludge, almost muddy, with a strange smell he couldn't place. Tim stared at it in the sink, dazed, trying to understand what he was seeing. A moment later, one of his coworkers, Danny, stepped in after him, concerned. "Hey, are you okay?" Tim didn't answer right away. He was still staring into the sink. Danny looked down and froze. "What the heck did you eat?" Tim wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His voice was low. "I've been eating the same thing as the rest of you guys, and doing the same things as the rest of you too. The only time I went off on my own was last night, when I went to soak." He paused, then slowly rolled up the leg of his pants, revealing the 3 faint but still visible scratches near his ankle. "I went to the onsen last night," he said, "by myself." Then he told Danny everything. The feeling of being pulled, the empty bath, the steam, the scratches, all of it. Danny knew a bit of Japanese, just enough to get by. He helped steady Tim out of the bathroom and approached one of the monks standing near the main hall. Tim stayed back, leaning against the post, feeling worse by the minute. The dizziness was getting worse. His limbs were heavy, and the nausea still lingering in the back of his throat. The monk glanced over at Tim. Then he spoke quickly to Danny in a low, serious tone. Danny nodded, then turned back. "The monk says something's clinging to you," Danny said. "Some kind of negative energy. It's starting to take hold." Without asking for anything, the monk disappeared into a small room in the back of the temple. A few minutes later, he returned with a plain Ziploc bag filled with coarse white salt. He handed it over to Tim and gave instructions through Danny's translation. "Use half of the salt in a bath, soak in it tonight. The other half, burn it in your room." He didn't explain further, and he didn't take any money. That night, back at the inn, Tim followed the monk's instructions. He filled up the wooden bathtub in his room, added half the salt, and let it dissolve in the hot water. The other half, he placed in a shallow metal tray he found in the room. Salt didn't burn easily, so it took him a few tries. He used a bit of lighter fluid from a pocket lighter he borrowed from one of his coworkers that smokes. It definitely took a few tries to get it going, but eventually, the salt caught. Then, faintly, from somewhere he couldn't place, Tim thought he heard a scream. It was distant, muffled, like someone yelling through layers of water or from behind a wall. He froze, listening, but it never came again. 10 minutes later, he started to feel better already. The heaviness lifted from his limbs. He didn't feel entirely back to normal yet, but the fog in his head was clearing. His stomach settled. His skin no longer felt cold. For the first time since the incident at the onsen, he felt okay. Later that evening, he even had the energy to rejoin the others for a short night walk around the village. When the trip ended and they returned to Hong Kong, Tim couldn't shake what had happened, so he started looking into the area, the inn, the town, the mountain it sat beside. What he found made his skin crawl. The region had a long history of earthquakes, some dating back to more than a century. Many people had died in this area. Some were buried, others were never found. Tim kept thinking back to the onsen, the hand that grabbed its leg, the strength of it, the way it had yanked him downward. Could it have been one of them? Someone who never left? He never got an answer. But he couldn't help wondering, what would have happened if they hadn't stopped by that temple? So, what do you guys think happened to Tim on this company trip? In both Japanese and Chinese culture, spirits of people who passed away violently or without proper burial rites are often believed to become wandering souls. Since the hotel was so close to an old disaster site, where many bodies were never recovered, it's very possible that the area is filled with unsatisfied spirits. These spirits are usually known to linger around water, since water is seen as a boundary between the living and the spiritual world. The pulling of Tim's leg could have been an attempt to drag him into its realm. Also, in Japanese tradition, going to certain spiritual hotspots like old temples, mountain paths, or onsens at night, it's frowned upon. It's believed that going to these places alone makes you vulnerable to spiritual attachment. These places are said to have high yin energy. In Chinese, this is yamhei, so spirits love to gather in places like these. Salt is deeply significant in both Japanese and Chinese purification rituals. The burning of salt, while uncommon, might have acted like a shock to the spirit. Not a formal exorcism, but enough to sever the attachment violently. The faint scream that Tim heard could represent the final release, the spirit being driven away, not pain in a literal sense, but an echo of separation. He burned the salt, essentially creating a barrier that forced it out. So I think that Tim was actually very lucky that his group happened to go visit the temple that day, because if it wasn't for the salt given to him there, I think he might have become slowly possessed. From the perspective of traditional East Asian spiritual beliefs, it's much easier to remove a spirit attachment early on, before it fully embeds itself, so Tim was extremely lucky he severed it. At the time he did, early stage attachment is weak and unstable. When the spirit first latches onto someone, it's usually through a temporary opening, like emotional vulnerability, physical exhaustion, or if the person enters a spiritually unclean place alone, as Tim unknowingly did. In this early phase, the spirit hasn't fully been able to merge with Tim's life energy yet. It's more like a parasite, trying to find a foothold. At this stage, simple purification rituals like salt baths and burning incense or visiting a temple are usually enough to repel or sever this connection. The longer it stays, the deeper the bond becomes, and the more it starts to affect the person's health, mind, and luck. Eventually, the spirit will begin to embed itself into the person's home or body. At that point, it's no longer just an external attachment, and it becomes a full-on spiritual possession, seongsun in Cantonese. Trying to remove it at this stage would be much more difficult. The process could take days, even weeks, or more. If Tim had waited a few more days, or gone back home to Hong Kong without doing anything, the spirit would have mostly followed. Once a spirit crosses the ocean with you, geography doesn't matter anymore. Tim would no longer be in a haunted place. He becomes the haunted person. So if you ever experience similar strange symptoms, such as Tim, after visiting new places, always keep this in mind. Just like with physical health, it's important to catch these things early on, when it's still easier to deal with before it festers into something much more terrifying. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. Looking forward for us to sit together again next week for more terrifying stories from Asia. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we have a pretty terrifying experience shared by a man in Hong Kong. This incident happened while he was riding the MTR one night. A quick note before we jump in. A lot of you have reached out asking if I could talk more about some of the beliefs that pop up in these stories, especially for those of you who aren't as familiar with Chinese spiritual traditions. It can feel a little mysterious or even confusing when things like Yum Yum An, known in the West as third eye, comes up. So here's how we're going to do it tonight. First, we're going to dive into tonight's ghost story. After that, I'll take a few minutes to go deeper into the cultural side of things. If you've ever wondered why some people can see ghosts and most of us can't, or what it really means to have Yum Yum An, I'll be breaking that down right after the story. So stick around, I think you'll find it fascinating. Alright, so let us dive in. Have you ever heard of a haunting in the MTR? That's Hong Kong's subway system. Unlike New York's MTA, which runs 24/7, the MTR shuts down each night, usually around midnight, depending on the line. After that, it's closed until the next morning. This story comes from a man living in Hong Kong. He shared this experience from a few years ago, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who's heard it. Let's call him Albert. Albert claims to have Yum Yum An, the third eye. It's rare, but it's not unheard of in Hong Kong. Albert's had this ability ever since he was a little boy. It's believed that most children are able to see spirits up to the age of 6 through 8 years old, whether they know it or not. This age is said to be the transition period to when they start losing the ability. By age 10, most children have already lost the ability entirely. The exception are people with Yum Yum An. Albert used to see spirits a lot more when he was younger. Now that he's older, the sightings still happen, just not as often. These days, it's more occasional, but they do still show up, especially during certain times of the year. He added that most of the time, it's actually pretty difficult differentiating if what he sees is a spirit or a person, because not all ghosts are like what we see in the movies. They don't just float up to you and scare you. Most of the time, it's much more subtle, as they usually keep to themselves. They look like regular people, doing regular things. You won't really know unless you really look closely at what they're doing. That's when you'll start noticing that something might be off. This is why I mentioned earlier that children sometimes don't even know they have this ability, because unless the spirit they see really sticks out to them, it's very easy to mistake the spirit for just another person in a crowd of people. Albert was 30 years old when the strange event happened to him in July, years ago. He worked in finance at the time, the kind of job where late nights aren't uncommon, especially when a deadline is coming up. At this time, his company was rushing to finish a new project, so for nearly a week straight, Albert found himself clocking out well past 11:30 p.m. That meant catching the very last or close to the last train home before the MTR shut down for the night. He always boarded at Yamade Station. Back then, it was the last stop on the Green Line. It's not anymore, they've since extended it, but at the time, it was the end of the line. This night was no different. Albert stepped into the end car and took his usual seat. One of those end spots near the glass panel. He liked leaning his shoulder against it during the ride. It was late, and as expected, the train was nearly empty. Maybe 5 or 6 other passengers scattered across the car he was in. As the doors closed and the train began to move, Albert leaned into the glass and let his mind drift as he started to unwind from the long day of work. That's when he noticed her, a young woman standing at the far corner of the car, right next to the door. She had her head down and she was wearing a red windbreaker. He couldn't see her face, just the top of her head and the way she just stood there, completely still. His first thought was maybe she was just dozing off, but then he glanced around. The car had plenty of empty seats, so why was she just standing there? He didn't think much of it at the time, other than it was a bit weird she chose to stand rather than sit, when the train was basically empty. The next night, Albert worked late again. This time, he almost didn't make the last train. He was sprinting through the station, tie loose, laptop bag bouncing at his side. The moment he stepped in through the doors, they closed shut behind him, cutting it close. Breathing heavily, He made his way through the nearly empty cars to his usual seat, that familiar end spot by the glass panel at the end of the train. He sat down, exhaled, and wiped the sweat off his forehead. That's when he saw her again. Same girl, same spot. She was standing in the same exact position as the night before, in the corner by the door, head tilted downward, motionless, still wearing the same red windbreaker. She was not browsing on her phone, not looking around, not even shifting her weight, just standing there. Now, that's when it started to feel a little off. So that night, Albert made a quiet decision. He was going to keep an eye on her, just to see where she got off. During the ride, Albert kept stealing glances at her. Just subtle shifts of the eyes, trying not to be obvious, but she didn't move. The entire ride, she stayed in the same exact position, head down, hands at her sides, like she was frozen in place. Passengers got on and off at random stops, but not a single person seemed to acknowledge her. It was like she wasn't even there. No one brushed past her, no one gave her a second look. Finally, the train reached the last station, end of the line. Everyone had to get off. Albert stood and kept his eyes on her as best as he could. He saw her step off the train, but by the time he got out himself, she was gone. Now at this point, Albert still didn't think anything paranormal was going on. He figured he just lost her in the shuffle. It was late, people were tired, and she must have slipped into the crowd. That's what he told himself. Until the third night. Same time, same routine. Albert got on the train and headed straight to his usual seat at the end, next to the glass panel. But tonight, the girl wasn't there. Maybe she didn't work late tonight, he thought. No big deal. Exhausted from the week, Albert leaned his head against the glass, shut his eyes, and took a little nap. 2 stops passed. The sound of shuffling feet, passengers getting off, stirred him awake. It was mostly people leaving the train now. Very few were getting on. He rubbed his eyes and glanced around. That's when he noticed a couple sitting across from him. His side of the row was completely empty, just him. The train then slipped into one of the dark tunnels, and that's when he saw it. In the reflection on the glass, Albert saw himself sitting there, but he also saw someone else sitting next to him. A woman. She was in the seat directly to his left, head turning toward him, smiling. Albert froze. He quickly turned his head to the left. The seat was empty. He looked back in the reflection. She was still there. Same posture, same smile, still staring straight at him. And then, her mouth slowly began to open, wider and wider, until an impossibly long tongue slid out, curling slightly at the end. It wasn't human. No way. No one's tongue should be that long. And that's when Albert knew. This wasn't his imagination. He was really seeing something again, even if it was only through the reflection this time. He didn't react, just looked downward, pretending like he didn't see anything. Maybe his body language gave something away because the couple across from him, they noticed his sudden change in demeanor. The woman nudged her partner. Both of them glanced at Albert and then at each other. And then, without saying a word, they stood up and quietly walked out of the car into the next one, similar to what most people do when they see a crazy person on the subway. Suddenly, Albert felt the left side of his face go numb. He turned slowly to the window, heart thudding in his chest, and in the reflection, he saw it. Her tongue. It was resting against his cheek. She hadn't moved an inch in the reflection, still sitting there beside him, smiling, but now, her long, unnatural tongue was pressed right against his face. Albert felt a wave of dread crash over him. He wanted to cry. He wanted to stand up and just run, to get as far away as possible. But his legs wouldn't move. It was like they didn't belong to him anymore. Completely frozen. So, he did the only thing he could. He shut his eyes. He couldn't bear to look anymore. About a minute passed. Felt like forever. Then, the train pulled up into Gaolongtong, one of the bigger interchange stations. More passengers began to board. Normal people, chatting quietly, scrolling on their phones. Albert slowly opened his eyes. They were out of the tunnel now, so the reflection in the window was faint, but still visible. She was gone. He looked around quickly, scanning the car. Nothing. No one strange, no one sitting beside him. Everyone who got on looked normal. And then he saw her. In the far corner of the car, same spot from the first 2 nights, was the girl in the red windbreaker. Head bowed, standing still, just like the last 2 days. Albert stared. There's one question that Albert still never figured out to this day. Was it the same spirit as the one who sat next to him and licked his face? The one who sat beside him was wearing different clothes, but could it be the same entity, or were there 2 separate entities that night? He never figured this out, but he feels like they were not the same entity. Train eventually rolled into the final station, where everyone had to get off and transfer to the opposite platform. Albert stood up, so did the others. He shuffled toward the door, but glanced back. The girl? She was still standing in there. She wasn't getting off. And then, as if sensing his gaze, she began to slowly raise her head. Albert immediately turned away. He didn't wait to see her face, because deep down, he knew he shouldn't look. The next morning, Albert noticed something strange. The left side of his face, the same spot where he felt the numbness the night before, had broken out into a rash. It wasn't severe at first, just some redness and irritation. But no matter what creams or ointments he tried, it stuck around. It took him a full month to get it resolved. But after that night, Albert stopped sitting in his usual spot. Anytime he had to work late and catch the last train home, he made sure to pick a car with more people in it. He stayed near the middle of the train. So, what do you guys think happened here to Albert? Was he just working so much that he was seeing things on the train? Or do you think the girl in the red was a lingering spirit? What about the one that sat next to him with the long tongue? Do you think they were the same spirit? Or did he come across 2 different spirits that night? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Alright, now as promised, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the beliefs surrounding the third eye in Chinese culture. First of all, what does Yum-Yong-An even translate to in English? Literal translation is yin-yang eyes, which means the ability to see both worlds, the living, Yuan, as well as the world of the dead, Yum, meaning people with these eyes can see ghosts, spirits, or even in some cases, other supernatural beings that were never human to begin with. It's like having a permanent sixth sense. The thing with these eyes is that it's not always active, but it's always present, meaning the person doesn't constantly see spirits 24/7. It goes a lot deeper than that. People with Yum-Yong-An carry the ability to see into the world of the dead at all times, but what they see and how clearly they can see it depends on many other factors. Even among people with these eyes, the intensity and clarity of how they perceive the spirits ranges from person to person, and it's dependent on a bunch of other factors as well. According to belief, there are said to be different levels or types of vision among people with Yum-Yong-An. These can be broken down into 5 main categories, but it doesn't mean that you are either one or the other. It can be a mixture of all of these, depending on the situation and the person. The first one is visual sight. This one is the most rare. It's full-body apparitions that look like people. Spirits are often indistinguishable from the living until something gives it away. For example, no shadow, no reflection, strange clothing, or the vacant, frozen expression. People in this category only realize something is off after something unexplainable happens, like the figure vanishing into thin air. Then, there's number 2, reflected sight. People in this category of Yum-Yong-An report sightings as more common in mirrors, glass, water surfaces, or any reflective surface, such as metal. So a spirit only appears when reflected, but not directly. Number 3 is peripheral sight. This is when the person sees a shadowy figure, but it's always at the corner of their eye. But when they turn to look at it directly, it's gone. Number 4 is energetic sensitivity. This is the feeling of being watched, sensing cold spots or sudden pressure, or feeling nausea when entering certain places. Many believe this is a more passive form of Yum-Yong-An, as it's more feeling than seeing. And then, there's number 5, dream sight, or sleep paralysis. Some people only see spirits in dreams or during episodes of sleep paralysis. In Chinese culture, these are considered real encounters, not imagination. The dream world is seen as a bridge between yin and yang. The intensity of sightings also has factors that affect it. Here are a few examples. The time of the year. During spirit-heavy festivals like Qingming, which is Tomb Sweeping Festival, and Yulan Di, which is Hungry Ghost Month. You may already remember this one from some of my prior episodes, but during these two times of year, the veil between the world of the living and the dead are considered thinner. So those with Yum-Yurng-An often report stronger and more frequent encounters during these periods. Then there's also location. Certain places, like hospitals or abandoned buildings, funeral parlors, old trees, stairwells, or MTR tunnels, are also believed to be places with higher amounts of yumhei. The stronger the yumhei, the more visible these spirits become to them. Yumhei could be described as negative energy. Then there's physical and emotional state. If a person is sick, weak, or emotionally drained, they're said to be more susceptible to seeing spirits. Their yang energy, which is another word for their life force, is lower, making it easier for spirits to approach or be seen. And then there's age. Many say that this ability is stronger in childhood and gradually dulls with age, unless the person has a really strong yum connection or spiritual sensitivity. These eyes aren't like a light switch that's permanently on. It's more like a sensor. There are conditions that can heighten or trigger the ability, but the sensitivity is always there in the background. For many who claim to have Yum-Yurng-An, they also share that seeing spirits isn't constant. It's unpredictable. They never know when something will appear or how intense it will be, and that's part of what makes it so terrifying. Imagine walking into a normal, crowded area with a lot of people, and out of nowhere, realizing someone on the platform has no feet, or that one of the people in the crowd has a gray, hollow face, and no one else seems to notice this. These aren't always dramatic, full-body apparitions. Sometimes it's glimpses, distortions, or just subtle details that feel wrong. So can people with these eyes just turn it off? The simple answer is no. In most traditional beliefs, people with Yum-Yurng-An can't just turn it off whenever they want to, but they can learn how to manage it, either through religious practices, spiritual mentorship, or just avoidance behaviors. Some people learn to dull their sensitivity. Some even stop seeing anything for years, but many report that it returns when they're sick or emotionally weak. So if you're Chinese, most likely you've heard growing up that if you ever do happen to see a spirit, it's usually better to pretend like you didn't see them at all. Most people that do have Yum-Yurng-An very often agree on this as well, as it's a pretty consistent theme you'll hear in Asia, that you should never let a random spirit know you can see them. Do you know why that is? Because in Chinese and Hong Kong folklore, once a spirit knows you can see them, there's a bigger chance they might follow you, or worse, cling to you. Many people that do have Yum-Yurng-An are taught, often from childhood, to just act normal when they do see something strange. Don't stare, and don't react. Also, don't speak. Just look away and carry on. It's not about fear. It's because if the spirit does end up following you, it's most likely because they want something. They might need help finishing unresolved business, a final prayer or ritual to pass on, or simply to be noticed. In more serious cases, they may even attach themselves to someone with weaker yang energy. We can probably spend hours diving even deeper into this topic, but this is pretty much a quick breakdown of the basics of what Yum-Yurng-An really is. I hope you all found this as interesting as I did. Until we meet again next week for more scary stories from Asia. Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into a pretty unsettling topic from Chinese folklore, something known as Taisan Guai. The name translates to replacement ghost, and refers to a chilling belief that a spirit can latch onto a living person, not randomly, but as a replacement, sometimes with the help of someone still alive. Now, some of you may have come across this topic before, but chances are, most of you haven't. So after tonight's story, I'll be taking some time to break down what this practice is, and how it ties into real cultural beliefs across Asia. Tonight's story takes us back to Hong Kong, where a young woman named Jen had a terrifying experience she's never been able to forget. At the time, Jen was in her early 20s and only a few years into her career. One evening after work, Jen went over to visit her childhood friend, Linda, to have dinner with her and Linda's parents. Linda lived with her parents in one of those familiar public housing estates, the kind stacked on top of each other with long corridors, cement walls, and flickering hallway lights that always seemed a little too dim. They were on the 9th floor. Jen remembers that clearly. The elevator doors had opened onto the floor that looked just like every other floor in the building. Same walls, same floors, and the same greenish tint from the overhead fluorescent bulbs on every floor. Linda's unit was a very typical Hong Kong apartment, the kind you'd find in just about every government block back then. It was small, but practical. An outer metal gate in front of the wooden front door. Inside the apartment was pretty narrow, with just enough space for a small living room, a dining table pressed up against the wall, and 2 bedrooms squeezed in the back. The floors were tiled in that beige speckled pattern you see everywhere in the 90s. The walls were slightly yellowed from the years of cooking, and a ceiling fan hummed softly overhead. Jen remembered the smell too, a mix of mothballs and cooking oil. Jen had known Linda for most of her life. They'd grown up together and were classmates since primary school. Back then, they were inseparable. But even as kids, they had their differences between them. Jen was always focused and always the top of her class. Linda was the opposite. Friendly, but never really into school. Her grades hovered near the bottom, and she didn't really seem to care. Over the years, their paths split more and more. Jen funded herself through school with scholarships, eventually becoming an ophthalmologist. Linda never made it into college. These days, she worked part-time at the bubble tea shop just downstairs. Still, they remained close. There was comfort in that kind of long friendship. Jen had been to Linda's apartment more times than she could count. It never changed. The same flickering fluorescent lights, the same cluttered living room. Linda's family had always struggled financially. Her mom, a sharp-tongued woman with a habit of speaking too loudly, was the kind of person who bragged about the smallest things. But Jen had always sensed something else behind her smile, a subtle tension, like deep down, the woman resented how well Jen had turned out, how successful she became, while her own daughter was on a different path in life. Jen never said anything. She was always polite, respectful. But deep down, she always wondered and felt this way through things that Linda's mom would say whenever Jen mentioned anything good happening in her life. Linda's mom would always try to downplay it with little subtle remarks. For example, at the time, Jen had recently purchased a brand new apartment. Instead of praise and everyone being happy for her, Linda's mom mentioned, "Oh, that area? It's not the best area." It was always similar comments like this whenever she shared anything positive in her life. So eventually, Jen just kept it all to herself and didn't share anything else with them. On this particular day, Jen arrived a little earlier than expected. She slipped off her shoes by the front door and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar clatter of cooking from the kitchen and the low hum of the television in the living room. Despite how Linda's mom was, she was always welcoming when Jen came around. Jen called them uncle and auntie. That's how she always called them. It was just polite. And even though Jen was a grown woman now, the honorifics stuck. Linda's dad gave Jen the usual nod of acknowledgement as he sat at the small dining table, flipping through the day's copy of the Chinese newspaper with his reading glasses low on his nose. In the kitchen, Linda's mom moved around as she was finishing up making the meal for everyone. The smell of stir-fried vegetables and salted fish drifted through the apartment. Jen and Linda sat on the old living room couch. It was one of those bulky fabric sofas with floral print, slightly sunken in the middle from years of use. They chatted about work for a bit and were just catching up. After dinner and hanging out for a bit longer, it was close to 9 p.m. when Jen began to get ready to leave. She stood up, slowly starting to gather her belongings, and thanked Linda's mom for the delicious meal. Linda was still lounging on the couch as she was saying goodbye to Jen. The evening had been perfectly ordinary. Jen turned toward the door, but something made her glance at the living room window. That's when it happened. There was a large window just behind the couch, facing out into the open air between buildings. And as Jen turned, made goodbye, something caught her eye. A movement. Just outside the large window. It was a figure. It floated by fairly quickly, gliding from left to right across the glass. Jen's breath caught in her throat. because the face on this figure was hers. It was her face, but pale and expressionless, looking straight at Jen. It drifted just inches from the glass. Jen froze. She didn't scream or move. For a second, her mind tried to convince her that she had imagined it. Maybe it was a reflection from the TV or something. But deep down, she knew what she saw. They were on the 9th floor. There was no balcony, no place for anyone to be standing outside. Everyone in the apartment saw her freeze. Linda stopped mid-sentence. They all turned to look at the window too, to see what Jen was so focused on looking at. But by then, the figure was gone. There was nothing outside now, just the glow of the other housing blocks. Jen stood there stiffly, her face pale, and then she told him what she saw. The room fell silent. Linda looked confused. Her dad scoffed gently. He didn't believe in this stuff, but her mom didn't laugh. She really believed in the supernatural. Instead, she gave Jen a very serious look. "Come with me tomorrow," she said. "I'll take you to see someone." The next day, Jen kept her promise. She met Linda's mom outside of the Sekime MTR station, and together, they walked to a nearby housing block. It wasn't a temple or a shop. It was an apartment. Just another old apartment in a quiet public estate. But this was where a Taoist priest lived, someone that Linda's mom had been to before. Once they reached the 7th floor, Linda's mom rang the bell. A moment later, it opened. Inside was dim and cluttered. Right by the door, there was a wooden altar with a Gunyam statue. The living room was filled with odd statues and stacks of ritual items, old bells, carved wood, dusty scrolls, things that Jen has never seen before. It didn't feel like a normal home, more like a hoarder's home, packed into a tiny apartment. She was guided to a chair in front of a heavy wooden desk in the middle of the room. The priest sat on the opposite side of the desk in front of her. He looked to be a regular middle-aged man, probably in his 50s, wearing a plain white polo and black slacks. Linda's mom explained everything. The priest nodded slowly, then asked Jen for her season batzi. This translates to the date and time of your birth. He scribbled some notes on a yellow piece of paper, lit a stick of incense, and began chanting in a low voice. He moved through a series of small rituals and burned the talisman. After some time, he stopped. "All is fine now," he said simply. He didn't tell her a price directly, but he did slide an empty red envelope across the table, suggesting that she could donate whatever she felt like was fair. Jen slipped a small amount of cash into it, bowing slightly as she handed it back. It didn't take long, but she thought that was the end of it. A few days passed without incident, until one night, not long after, she met up with Linda again for a late-night dinner. It was already past 10 by the time they finished dating, and since Jen's new apartment was a bit further away, she decided to just stay over at Linda's place for the night, as she had to be back again the next morning to meet up with another friend for dim sum. The walk back to the apartment block was quiet, just the two of them strolling back casually as they continued to talk. About halfway through the walk, Jen felt something strange. Her shirt felt like it was being tugged on. At first, she thought it was just the wind, or maybe her handbag caught the shirt in a weird way, but it wasn't that. It was a distinct downward pull, like someone had taken a hold of the fabric from behind and was gently but persistently pulling down. She even felt the pressure of the shirt on both her shoulders. She reached back, adjusting it. Nothing there. It stayed with her the entire walk, until they reached Linda's apartment. Back at Linda's apartment, everything felt normal again. That strange tugging on her shirt seemed to have stopped the moment she stepped inside. Jen put her bag down on the couch before heading into the bathroom for a quick shower. Linda's parents were asleep already. She closed the door behind her as she hopped in the shower. As the water was running down her face, something shifted. Jen didn't notice it at first. It was more like a sudden change in her mood, a sudden weight pressing down on her chest. Thoughts began to form in her mind. Thoughts that weren't hers. Dark thoughts of not wanting to be in this world anymore. Jen's eyes wandered. On the soap rack was a pair of scissors, the kind used for trimming hair. She didn't think, she just reached for them. She opened the blades slowly, then gripped them with her right hand tightly. Blood welled up almost instantly in her palm. It mixed with the running water. For some reason, it didn't hurt at all. It was almost as if Jen was in a dream. She stood there in the warm running water, gripping the pair of scissors tighter as if her body was being guided by something else. Jen wasn't someone who struggled with depression. In fact, she couldn't have been happier with where she is in life right now. She loved her job as an ophthalmologist. Her parents were healthy, and she just bought her own apartment in Hong Kong. A pretty impressive accomplishment. Nothing felt wrong at all. Until now. As Jen was gripping onto the scissors, she tried to fight these dark, intrusive thoughts until something inside her snapped awake. She pulled herself back out of this strange trance and dropped the scissors onto the shower floor with a metallic clatter. Her hands were shaking. Blood ran down the drain with the running water. She shut off the water, quickly got dressed, and stumbled out of the bathroom. Linda saw her immediately. Her eyes went wide. What happened? Did you accidentally cut yourself on something? Jen could barely speak. Her voice trembled as she told Linda everything, the strange thoughts and the scissors. Linda looked concerned for her friend. She ran over to the drawer and grabbed the first aid kit, and gently wrapped Jen's hand in gauze, cleaning the cut in silence. That night, neither of them slept well. Jen laid out a thin mattress on the floor beside Linda's bed. The apartment was small, so space was tight, but that wasn't what kept her awake. Something about the air felt heavy and off. At some point, exhaustion finally pulled her under, but even her dreams were really weird. In her dream, Jen was at work. She was standing in the dim glow of the exam room, adjusting the lens machine in front of a female patient. It was just another routine checkup, at first. The woman looked unfamiliar, middle-aged, neatly dressed, but there was something strange about her face. The way she smiled at Jen without blinking, a stiff, unnatural smile. Jen asked her to read the letters back to her on the vision chart, but the woman didn't speak. She just sat straight up in her chair, smiling, staring at Jen. Jen's skin prickled. She didn't know this person, she was sure of that, but the way the woman stared at her made her stomach twist. And then, the woman started to laugh. It was low at first, but as she continued laughing, it became louder and louder. It seemed like the laugh wasn't just coming out of this woman's mouth anymore, but it was coming from all around Jen, as if it was being projected into her head. As she laughed, her face began to change, bit by bit, feature by feature. Her chin, her mouth, her eyes, until Jen was no longer looking at a stranger. She was staring at herself, her own face sitting across from her, smiling and laughing. Jen jolted awake, heart pounding, drenched in cold sweat. She laid on the floor in the darkness of Linda's room, listening to the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, her breath uneven. The dream was so vivid. She'd never experienced a nightmare like this before in her life. The next morning, things felt normal again. The strange heaviness was gone, and her thoughts were clear again. But now, her hand throbbed. She said goodbye to Linda and left the apartment, heading to meet another friend for dim sum. It was a casual meetup, already planned earlier in the week, with a friend she hadn't seen in weeks. They were sitting at a small table in a crowded restaurant, sipping tea and picking at hagao, when Jen finally told her friend everything, from the floating face, the Taoist priest, the scissors, and even the nightmares last night. Her friend put her chopsticks down and looked up at her, concerned. Jen, that's not normal. I think you might have bumped into some wuzhouye. This translates to unclean things, which is another way we say ghosts. I think I know someone you should see, she said. Jen had nowhere else to be that day, so she agreed. And by now, she was sure something was happening to her. After dim sum, they headed to Gaolongtong. It wasn't a shop or a clinic. Again, it was just another ordinary apartment, tucked inside one of those quiet aging towers. The woman that they were going to visit wasn't a proper Taoist priest or spirit medium. She was just an older Chinese lady, but a lot of locals swore by her. They said she could see things that most people couldn't, and as soon as Jen stepped inside, something felt wrong. The moment she stepped into the apartment, a wave of dizziness hit her. The lights seemed dimmer, the air heavier. It felt like walking into a dream. Everything was hazy and muffled, like she was drifting further from her own body. The old woman looked straight at her and said, Wait, you're being followed by something. A woman. She didn't find you on her own. Someone helped her, gave her a way to cling to you. This wasn't random. Someone guided her and placed her in your path. This didn't happen by accident. Jen didn't know how to respond. Her vision blurred. Her legs moved without thinking. Something in her mind, something was telling her to leave. Her body actually turned toward the door, ready to walk out. Her friend grabbed her arm. The old woman got up slowly, stepped forward, and gave Jen a gentle slap across the face. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. Jen snapped back. It was as if she was in the same dreamlike state she was in last night, where her body was doing things on its own. "Sit down," the woman said, calm, but firm. "Close your eyes." Jen sat. She felt the old woman's warm hand rest on her shoulder. "Now think back. Where have you been these past few days? Anywhere unfamiliar? Strange? A place where you normally wouldn't go?" Jen tried. She combed through her memories, the nightmare, Linda's apartment, the walk home. Then it came to her. The day she went to see that Taoist priest, the one Linda's mom had brought her to. The old woman didn't say anything for a moment. Then she spoke. "Is this the building?" she asked. "2 elevators? Trash room on the right?" Jen's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't said anything out loud. She nodded slowly. "Okay, keep going," the old woman said. "Step into the elevator, hit the button, go up." In her mind, Jen did exactly that. The memory became clearer, like she was reliving it in real time. She watched herself step out of the elevator, but then she hesitated. "I can't remember if I turned left or right here," she said quietly. But the old woman somehow already knew. "Is it the unit with the gunyam by the door?" she asked. "The one filled with old artifacts and other statues?" Jen nodded again. "By any chance, did you give anyone your sisambatsi in this apartment?" Jen whispered, "Yes." The old woman continued. "I see the paper," she said. "Your name, your date, your time of birth. It's under the foot of a statue of Deji Gong." Jen froze. "But there's something else. Another paper. Someone else's name. Their sisambatsi stacked right on top of yours." For those of you unfamiliar, Deji Gong sometimes translates as the Lord of Landlords, or Landlord Spirit. It's a local guardian figure in Chinese folk tradition. He's not considered a major deity in formal Taoism, but more like a protective spirit tied to a specific piece of land, a building or a home. Not to be confused with the more popular Tou Dei Gong, which is the god of earth, who is a much higher ranking earth deity, responsible for the well-being of an area's land, crops, weather, and sometimes even local justice. People pray to him for protection and land-related matters. He oversees entire regions, villages, or even towns, not just a specific home or small property like Deji Gong. It's common to see the statue of Deji Gong near the entrance of older apartments, especially in Hong Kong. People light incense, leave small offerings, and pray to him for safety and stability. Jen wasn't sure what this meant. The old woman explained that this practice is related to Tai San. It literally translates to substitute body, or replacement. The priest that she saw at that apartment, for whatever reason, put her information underneath another person's information. In traditional Chinese folk beliefs, if someone else's sisambatsi is found to be aligned beneath or inside another person's sisambatsi, it usually means that the one that is on top or on the outside is the information of someone that's already dead. Since Jen's information was under another person's, it means she was now entangled with that of a restless or unjustly deceased spirit, where that spirit would be trying to drag Jen toward their fate. This goes much deeper than this, but I can elaborate more at the end. The old woman told all of this to Jen. Now that she has located the issue, she performed some sort of separation ritual. It took about an hour, but after a lot of chanting and burning of papers and paper dolls, she told Jen all will be fine now, and to never go back to that Taoist priest's apartment. Also, to stop giving out her sisambatsi willy-nilly like that. Jen never knew why that Taoist priest did this to her. She's never met him before that day. She couldn't help but think, did Linda's mom have something to do with this? Was it jealousy? Hate? Could she not accept the fact that Jen was doing so much better in life than her own daughter and themselves, that she wanted to interfere and try to take it all away? After this incident, Jen never slept over or even went over to Linda's apartment again. She did still meet up with Linda occasionally, outside their home. There wasn't any way for Jen to prove anything, but just to be safe, she kept her distance from Linda's family. So, what do you guys think happened? Was it just bad luck? A run-in with the wrong Taoist priest at the wrong time? Maybe he just didn't like how much she tipped him after that ritual. Maybe he saw something in her that he just didn't like. Or was it something deeper? Could Linda's mom have been involved? After all, she struggled her whole life, barely getting by, watching her own daughter grow up with the same kind of limitations. And then here comes Jen, same age, same background, but living a completely different life. A luxury flat, a career as an ophthalmologist, everything that might have felt out of reach for someone like Linda or her mom. And what about the spirit that Jen saw at Linda's apartment, the one with her face? If this was the priestess doing alone, how did he know she would come see him in the first place? Did Linda's mom already meet with the priest beforehand to do something? If you ever find yourself in a place where these things are taken seriously, just be careful who you trust, and never, ever share your season batzi. That's the combination of your date of birth and time of birth with someone you don't fully trust. In the wrong hands, it's said to give others power over your fate. But then of course, I think most of us here wouldn't even know where to find this information. I mean, if you asked me what time I was born, I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Alright, I wanted to dive a little deeper into the cultural belief of substitution, or Taisun. Have you ever heard of this before? In Chinese spiritual beliefs, Taisun literally translates to substitute body, or body double. It's the idea that a person can have a spiritual proxy take their place, either by diverting misfortune, absorbing a curse, or to be sacrificed in their place. There are a handful of different forms of Taisun. Let's just cover a few. The first is protective Taisun. This is a misfortune replacement. In some Taoist or folk practices, people would create a Taisun using small paper effigies, straw dolls, or even clothing. It's believed that the substitute can trick or mislead malevolent spirits, absorbing the bad luck, illness, or even death that was meant for the actual person. After the ritual, the Taisun is typically burned or discarded, symbolically removing the misfortune. The second type is malicious Taisun, or spiritual manipulation. This is a much darker version, and it's the one relevant to the story we just shared together. Some believe that if you have access to someone's Sisambatsi, and you're spiritually skilled, or working with a practitioner, you can create a Taisun to target them. In the wrong hands, it can be used to transfer karmic debt to someone else, draw a spirit to attach to them, or even set them up as a sacrificial stand-in for rituals involving curses, summonings, or spiritual bindings. In our story, Jen gave her Sisambatsi to the strange Taoist priest, and later finds out that another Sisambatsi was written down and placed on top of hers. The female spirit might not have been targeting Jen at first, but was now bound to her through this ritual. If Linda's mom was involved or colluded with the priest, it could have been a form of spiritual transference. Perhaps offloading a haunting or a curse from Linda's life onto Jen's, making Jen the bearer of misfortune that wasn't meant for her. This is one possibility. The other possibility is that the Taoist priest did this not to transfer any existing curses or hauntings, but to create one, attacking Jen by sending that female spirit. That female spirit could have been something called a Taisun Guai, a replacement ghost. You may be thinking, if this female spirit was a person who's passed, then what are they trying to replace? What's the point of this? So this goes pretty deep, but the simple answer is that these types of spirits usually died unjustly, meaning that they may have ended their own life, a sudden accident, or maybe their life was ended by another person. The spirit is most likely trapped in the mortal world, lost, wandering in limbo, also vengeful and desperate to escape the suffering. These are spirits that can't reincarnate, find peace, or move on to the next phase of existence. So, in order for these types of ghosts to escape its cursed state is by making someone else die in their place, like a spiritual substitution. This is based on the idea of karma balancing. So, how it's believed to work is that the spirit would trick or drag this person to their death, often in the same way that they died. This new death closes the loop in a way, allowing for the original ghost to finally leave, and this living person that just passed becomes the new restless spirit in their place, and the first ghost reincarnates or moves on. In traditional Chinese belief, water is very yin. In Cantonese, we say yam. It's spiritually heavy, cold, and associated with the dead. Spirits are thought to gather near water, especially at night. This is why rivers, lakes, canals, and bridges are common places where accidents and ghost sightings occur. This is why you often hear old people warn, never walk alone at night near water. If a ghost needs a Taisun, you might be the one it chooses. People who are being targeted as a Taisun by one of these spirits may experience sudden dark thoughts of ending one's own life, with no previous mental health issues, recurring dreams of drowning, falling, or death, seeing a version of themselves either in dreams or in real life. Also, strong urges to visit or return to a particular place. This is usually a place that's linked to the ghost's original death. The ghost isn't trying to kill for revenge, it's trying to escape its never-ending loop. But escape comes at a cost, and someone else has to pay for it. Do you know what I mean when I say never-ending loop? These spirits that are trapped in the mortal world are not just aimlessly floating around. They are often believed to be reliving the moment or the state of their death over and over again. If the spirit died in fear, pain, betrayal, or despair, they may be locked into the emotions and sensations of that moment, especially if the spirit ended their own life, drowned, or if it was a violent death. It's believed that the soul can become spiritually stuck, repeating these moments endlessly. This leads to suffering, confusion, and a loss of identity. Sometimes, they might not even remember who they were. This is sometimes described as a kind of ghost loop, where time doesn't pass and spirit becomes emotionally frozen. These spirits sometimes find a Taisun through a few methods. 1. They mistake a living person for itself, especially if they share similar energy, looks, or fate. 2. They were guided by someone like a priest or jealous person to attach to a new vessel. Or 3. They actively try to trade places with someone living, trying to break the loop. By forcing the living person to die in the same way, this ghost recreates the original moment of death, but with a different soul. This topic is another one that goes pretty deep, so we'll just stick with the basics in this episode. I hope you found this episode as fascinating as I have. Looking forward to us to meet again next week.